Chapter 1633. In practically an instant, Yang Jian and the great sage appeared on either side of Yi Zichen. The spiritual energy in their bodies surged. Although the two of them did not release their spiritual energy, everyone could feel the heavy pressure in this narrow chamber. Quite a few experts who'd rushed over looked up at the two groups of people who were about to clash. Isn't that the demon emperor Kuei Lin? What's he doing here? Isn't that obvious? Who wouldn't be interested in transcendence? Who on earth dares oppose the demon emperor, the god emperor? Everyone in the underground chamber looked over. Most of the people who spoke were emperors, people who hadn't yet reached the imperial emperor realm but still wanted to try their luck. In their eyes, the god, Yao, and demon emperors were supreme existences. Those who dared to go against people of this level were only people of the same realm as them. He doesn't seem to be the god emperor. If I'm not wrong, that's Yi Zichen, who's risen to fame in recent years. I think the 10th Divine Mountain is his territory. Some sharp-eyed people recognized Yi Zichen. Those who didn't recognize Yi Zichen seemed to understand when he mentioned the 10th Divine Mountain. The 9 Divine Mountains had existed since the beginning of the god race, and nothing had changed in billions of years. The 10th Divine Mountain's appearance wasn't just a shock to the gods. It was a huge blow to the Yao and demons as well. Those who hadn't known about Yi Zichen's enmity with the demon emperor now understood. Alliance head Yi, who'd risen to fame in recent years, seemed to have a deep grudge against the demon emperor. Otherwise, as soon as they met, the two sides wouldn't have drawn their swords. The lower-level emperors were dumbfounded. They were afraid that if the emperors started fighting, they'd be caught in the crossfire. The secluded seniors only glanced at this indifferently before withdrawing their gazes. They had already passed the age of watching this kind of excitement. In their hearts, their only hope was to find the Transcendence Tomb, to find the slightest opportunity to break through their shackles. It seems he's the one we're looking for. Not far away, a Lolita-like girl stood beside a burly man with a smile on her face. Her tender little face rippled with maturity that did not match her age. If I'm not mistaken, it's him. The burly man nodded. Pay close attention to him in the future, but it's not bad. At least he has many experts around him, so he doesn't need us to be his nanny. The girl squinted her eyes and smiled, then looked away from Yi Zichen. Her expression returned to that of a young, innocent girl. When the brawny man saw this, he couldn't help but endure. He couldn't help but shiver. Demon Emperor Kuei Lin, with his reputation, even if his appearance didn't cause a commotion, it would at least attract attention. To Yi Zichen's surprise, he'd silently appeared behind Yi Zichen. No one noticed him until he spoke. Don't be too nervous. Kuei Lin laughed and shrugged, then took a few steps back. I have no intention of attacking Alliance Head Yi. If I really wanted to, you'd be looking at his corpse right now. These words were true. No matter how Kuei Lin had obtained his position, his strength was not to be underestimated. No matter how fast Yang Jian and the great sage reacted, they were still far too slow for someone like Kuei Lin. If he'd wanted to, Yi Zichen would have been lying in a pool of his own blood. Yi Zichen was still standing there, unharmed. That meant Kuei Lin really had no intention of attacking. Suddenly, another group of people emerged from the underground chamber. As soon as they appeared, they caught everyone's attention. Yi Zichen and the others looked behind them and saw that the newcomers were the Sea Emperor, the Fox Empress, and the others. What pair of good dogs! Su Qingyan glanced at Jiao Hai and Tai Tan, who stood by the Demon Emperor's side. The relationship between the demon race and the demon race had always been hostile. Although the relationship between the three races was ambiguous, in terms of distance, the relationship between the demon race and the human race was closer. No matter what, in the primordial era, the demons had wantonly plundered the Yao and humans' territories. It was only after the Yao and humans joined forces that the demons were defeated. They retreated. Jiao Hai and Tai Tan were the rulers of the Yao realm, yet they'd ignored their old grudges and joined forces with Kuei Lin. How shameful! Don't talk so arrogantly about us. The end of an era is a place where only the fittest live. Didn't you, the Yao and sacred clans, submit to humans as well? Said Jiao Hai disdainfully. Jiao Hai, we're not here to argue about this. Kuei Lin reached out and stopped Jiao Hai, then glanced at Yi Zichen. He knew full well that Yi Zichen held the final say. Yi Zichen didn't know what Kuei Lin's goal was, but since he was in the mood to fight, that was exactly what Yi Zichen wanted to see. He shook his head at the Empress, then glanced at Yang Jian and the Great Sage. Only then did they retract their auras. Yi Zichen narrowed his eyes. I never would have guessed the Demon Emperor would be interested in this as well. Alliance head Yi, who wouldn't be interested in transcendence? Kuei Lin laughed heartily. Alliance head Yi, aren't you interested in this place as well? Otherwise, you wouldn't have come all the way here, would you? Yi Zichen smiled, but didn't explain. There was nothing to explain to Kuei Lin. Rather, he was interested in what Kuei Lin had just said. What did the Demon Emperor mean just now? I just think your vigilance is too low. This place is fraught with danger. If things go on like this, I'm afraid you'll lose your head. Kuei Lin assumed Yi Zichen was asking why he'd appeared behind Yi Zichen but hadn't attacked. You misunderstand, Demon Emperor. I wanted to ask what you meant when you said Zhou Wu couldn't enter, said Yi Zichen. This time, Kuei Lin froze. He hadn't expected Yi Zichen to still have no idea what was going on outside. Alliance head Yi, you still don't know? It just so happens that the Ocean Emperor and the others are here, so they can explain it to you. I'm just here to say hello. Alliance head Yi, you seem to be on guard against me, and my people don't like interacting with you. Farewell. With a smile, Kuei Lin led his people to where most people were gathered. The people who'd gathered there instinctively made way for him. Yi Zichen watched them leave, then turned to the Ocean Emperor. Why can't Zhou Wu enter? It's strange, actually. The Ocean Emperor explained the situation to him. The more Yi Zichen listened, the more puzzled he became. Anyone could enter, but Zhou Wu couldn't. Zhou Wu did everything he could to transcend, but in the end, he wasn't fated to do so. How laughable, sneered Great Emperor Bian. He wasn't fated to do so. Yi Zichen didn't know why, but he felt like he'd heard this from someone else before, but he just couldn't remember who it was. However, it was a good thing Zhou Wu couldn't enter. There were too many people he needed to watch out for. Without him, he'd have less time to pay attention to him. Little did he know, right outside the tomb, Ice's sorrow, the once blazing howling canyon, had now turned into a world of ice. The mournful cold wind mixed with ice and snow howled around the howling canyon. In front of the tomb stood a man whose entire body was burning with flames. At this moment, his face and body were covered with wounds. Fresh blood flowed from the wound, but not long after it flowed out, it was frozen into ice crystals. The person burning with flames was Zhou Wu. Compared to the flames that seemed to burn the world to ashes in the beginning, the flames on Zhou Wu's body were a lot dimmer. The domain that he had released was also destroyed and smashed to pieces. It was clear that the lofty God Emperor, Zhou Wu, had fallen into a disadvantageous position. Eat this daddy's stick. The biting frost froze Zhou Wu's movements somewhat sluggish. Go Yuzhan, with a hogue on his head, grasped an iron staff that could change its size at will. His eyes flashed with ferocity as he swung it at Zhou Wu's vitals. Go Yuzhan was confident that if he swung his staff, Zhou Wu wouldn't be able to retreat. Even if he didn't die, he'd be gravely injured. To his surprise, as the staff descended, a barrier appeared around Zhou Wu, blocking the fatal blow. Reinforcements have arrived. Go Yuzhan retreated 100 meters and looked around vigilantly. The others slowed down their attacks and scanned their surroundings with their divine senses. No one. There wasn't even a single living thing within 1,000,000 miles, let alone someone they were wary of. It's you. Zhou Wu narrowed his eyes at the stone statue, his face still dripping with blood. Leave. You won't be able to enter. If you want to force your way through, with the starlight of our 4 auxiliary stars here, you have no chance of winning against this generation's 4 auxiliary stars, said the stone statue in front of the tomb. Despite his grave injuries, Zhou Wu didn't lower his arrogant head. His gaze swept across the tomb that bore his last hope. Then he looked at the 4 auxiliary stars that were surrounded by surging starlight and surging auras. Even if he didn't want to retreat, he still had to adapt to the circumstances. He probably wouldn't be able to force his way in. I admit defeat. Zhou Wu unwillingly pursed his lips and nodded his head. His scattered hair and scarlet eyes made him look extremely miserable. The supreme celestial race emperor had been defeated. "Open the barrier and let me return," said the stone statue. "You can leave now, but before you go, I want to give you a piece of advice," said the stone statue. "Transcendence isn't fated with you. No matter what methods you use, you won't be able to enter the transcendent realm. I advise you to give up. The era is about to end. Even if you can't transcend, you're still an outstanding talent in the three realms. You are already an outstanding talent in the three realms. The Terminus needs an expert like you. Let go of the obsession in your heart, and perhaps your future will suddenly become clear." The stone statue tried its best to persuade Zhou Wu. Zhou Wu's expression contorted uncontrollably. Chapter 16:34. A fiery beam streaked across the sky. Zhou Wu did not persist any further and left. The four auxiliary stars landed in front of the tomb and looked in the direction Zhou Wu had left in. They could not help but speak to the stone statue. "Why did you let him go just like that? He will definitely be a disaster if you keep him alive." From Zhou Wu's departure, Yin Shang could sense the unwillingness and resentment in his heart that he did not dare to express. How could such a person, who harbored hatred in his heart, suddenly come to his senses with just a few words from the stone statue? Yin Shang did not understand the stone statue's actions, but he had to respect them. As one of the four auxiliary stars, he knew very well that these four statues were actually the previous generation's four great auxiliary stars. "That's right. If I had used that stick just now, I would have definitely crippled him," Go Yuzhan said. "He's useful." The stone statue sighed with great vicissitudes. The first era has already been destroyed, and the second era has yet to transcend. The God of Termination's military force will be deployed in full force to deal with the third era. After that, the pressure on the third era would definitely multiply. No matter what Zhou Wu's character was like, his realm could not be underestimated. It's easy to abandon. "I'm just afraid that when the time comes, he will make a false accusation," Yin Shang said. The stone statue only sighed and did not say anything else. Of course, he had considered this possibility, but he still held a sliver of hope for Zhou Wu. If he could really come to his senses and give up his obsession with transcendence, his existence was bound to be a huge problem for the Terminator gods. Forget it. Zhou Wu's already escaped. There's no point in saying all this. Is there nothing else? If there's nothing else, I'll head back. Xiao Yuli is still waiting for me at home. Go Yuzhan said as he stroked the ahog on his head. I need to stand guard over the river Styx as well. If there's nothing else, I'll be heading back, said Su Yun. Su Luer and Yin Shang were the same. They'd come here on orders from the former auxiliary stars to stop Zhou Wuqiang from entering the tomb. Since the mission had been completed, they were definitely not idle people. There were still many matters that needed to be dealt with. Go back. Once you're back, comprehend the method of using the stars we taught you. The future era will still need your protection. They nodded and cupped their hands at the stone statue. Then, they turned into 4 stars and disappeared above the clouds. After they left, the stone statue in front of the tomb let out a human-like sigh. It turned back to look at the tomb they had guarded for hundreds of millions of years before looking in the direction Zhou Wu had left. Don't be stubborn. Damn it. Damn it. Zhou Wu, who was covered in blood, cursed angrily in his heart. The stone statue's words woke him up. Stop dreaming. Transcendence. That was Zhou Wu's dream for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. Just based on a few words from the stone statue, it was certain that he couldn't step into the transcendence realm. Why? Why can't I transcend? Just what am I lacking? Damn the 4 auxiliary stars. Damn you. When Zhou Wu recalled how he had humbly accepted his failure and fled with his tail between his legs, he clenched his teeth in hatred. However, after fighting with the 4 auxiliary stars, he realized that he had made a huge mistake in his understanding of the stars. In terms of realms, the 4 auxiliary stars were no match for him. The 4 of them had joined forces to beat him to such a state because of their inexhaustible starlight. However, he still didn't understand why the 4 auxiliary stars could increase their combat strength by so much with the support of starlight. He had the Emperor Star's starlight in his body, But why was he unable to convert it into the combat strength of the 4 auxiliary stars when he mobilized it? In terms of starlight grade, the Emperor Star Starlight was above the auxiliary star Starlight. Cute little fellow, it looks like you've encountered some trouble. A young man dressed like a clown walked out of the lush forest. His red nose and dark circles made him look so comical that anyone who saw him would involuntarily laugh out loud. Zhou didn't laugh. In fact, he was furious. Little fellow, was this clown talking about him? Zhou, who was already filled with resentment from the 4 auxiliary stars, instantly vented it all on this comical clown. Courting death. Spatial compression. It was unknown if the stone statue's words had some effect on him, but Zhou didn't use the fire elemental Dao that he had yet to condense a Dao heart. Instead, he chose the spatial great Dao. The moment he said that, the space around the clown was compressed endlessly. The ancient tree that was in the same area as the clown couldn't withstand the spatial compression and directly turned to dust. The clown was squeezed so hard that blood kept flowing out of his nose and mouth. Oomph. Upon seeing this scene, a smile appeared on Zhou Wu's face. This was the outcome of insulting him. The clown's fate was already set in stone. Under the spatial compression, no one could save him. Zhou Wu turned and left without turning his head back. From his point of view, there was no point in appreciating the death of a person who was trying to please the crowd. After walking 100 meters, little fellow, you sure aren't friendly. A voice that was mixed with some resentment suddenly appeared in front of Zhou Wu. Immediately, a strangely dressed fellow appeared in front of him. Especially his red nose, Zhou Wu stared back. The clown that had been compressed by his spatial compression was still in the compressed space. It was obvious that his bones had been completely crushed. His entire body was curled up in an irregular motion in the narrow space. The clown in front of him was identical to the clown from before. Aren't you very surprised? The clown narrowed his eyes and lightly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot. Then, he jumped onto a boulder that was dozens of meters tall behind him. Who are you? Zhou Wu sensed that the clown was extraordinary. Even though he could tell from the aura that the clown exuded that he was just an ant that had just reached the celestial being realm. Why are you asking me? Standing on the boulder, the clown turned around twice. Is it that hard to tell? I'm an artist who brings joy and laughter to people. Artist? This is the first time I've met someone who described a clown as an artist. Zhou Wu sneered. Little fellow, please watch your words. I've already introduced myself. I'm an artist who brings joy and joy to people. I'm not the despicable clown that only knows how to please the crowd. The clown said angrily. Then why did you come looking for me? Zhou Wu asked. I can tell that you're in a terrible mood. You seem to have encountered some problem. I've said it before. I'm an artist who brings joy and laughter to people. Your terrible mood makes me feel very uncomfortable, so I've come to let you enjoy the joy in your heart. The clown said. What a joke. The clown's words are getting weirder and weirder. If it wasn't for the fact that the clown looked a little special, Zhou would not have wanted to waste time with it. He still needed to go back and study the method of transcendence. He was just one step away from it, so he did not want to waste time on unimportant things. Hey, poor little fellow. The great Thimu artist is right in front of you. This is a rare piece of good luck for you. Yet you choose to ignore it? The clown leaped and landed in front of Zhou Wu, blocking his way. Its entire face was pressed against Zhou Wu's face, and its bright red nose was almost touching Zhou Wu's face. I suggest that you consider it carefully. Do you want me to help you resolve the terrible emotions in your heart? Resolve? Are you going to perform a juggling act for me? Zhou Wu sneered. Hey, little fellow, don't look at me like that guy who likes to please the crowd. The great Thimu artist would not do such a ridiculous thing. We're high-end. It grinned and tilted its head. Why don't you let the great Thimu guess what you're distressed about? Zhou Wu did not say anything, but he did not reject it either. He wanted to see what the clown could say. You want to transcend, but you encountered some trouble, right? The clown held its chin and looked at Zhou Wu's face. The Transcendence Tomb rejected you and didn't let you in. You were even beaten up. You're very angry. You saw it. Zhou Wu suddenly reached out and grabbed its neck. Are you here to cancel this emperor on purpose? Hey, you're hurting me. It patted Zhou Wu's arm with a smile. Seeing that he did not let go, It could only shrug its shoulders. Another clown with a red nose appeared in Zhou Wu's vision. The Great Thimu doesn't do things that make fun of others. You said you saw it. The Great Thimu did indeed see it, but it was from your face. There was another one. Zhou Wu stared at the Thimu that suddenly appeared. The Thimu that he was strangling was still patting his arm to get him to let go. The Thimu that had been compressed by space was still inside the space. His hand loosened inexplicably, and the Thimu twisted its neck and tilted its head. At least you're tactful. After he said that, the other, his Mu, resented Zhou Wu for letting go. Why didn't you just strangle him to death? Hey, you're just a substitute. Don't tell me you want to take over the position of the Great Mother? Her mother, whose neck was being strangled, suddenly jumped toward her mother who appeared behind her. The two of them wrestled together like street thugs. However, the only difference between the two of them was that their methods were much crueler than the hooligans in the streets. In less than 100 breaths of time, it was torn into several pieces by the neck. The one that survived had an arrogant look on its face, and it even used its foot to kick its torn body. What a pathetic fellow. Zhou Wu found it difficult to understand what was happening in front of him. The clowns that had appeared were not the same person. We finally dealt with that fellow. Hey, poor fellow, what are you looking at? It looked at Zhou Wu, who was still looking at its dismembered body, and waved its hand. Don't worry about that sad guy. His existence is like rotten food. The stench from his body is just polluting this fresh air. The air. Zhou Wu believed that he had lived long enough and had seen enough strange things, but the scene in front of him, he was really shocked. However, it was this cruel scene that made Zhou Wu have an inexplicable thought. The Great Thimu Artist. Chapter 1635. Back in the forest, Zhou Wu's expression changed. He looked humbly at the clown, as if he were seeking guidance. He naturally wouldn't give up on his dream of transcendence, but deep down, he knew that if he couldn't enter the God Emperor's tomb, transcendence might truly be an extravagant hope. Even if he'd seized a star, it would be difficult for his starlight to cross the chasm between the four auxiliary stars, much less cover the Emperor's star's radiance. The clown before him was simply too miraculous. Whether it was his appearance or his subsequent actions, Zhou Wu couldn't help but feel that the clown was extraordinary. Perhaps this was a rare opportunity for him. Zhou Wu lowered his head devoutly and quietly waited for the clown's response. Of course, no problem. The artist's eyes flashed with pride. He puffed out his chest, but when paired with his face, he always seemed comical. This is no problem at all for the great artist. I'd like to ask the great artist to point me in the right direction, said Zhou Wu. However, before that, you have to promise the great artist one thing, said the artist. All right, I can promise you anything. Then offer your soul to her, and let you become her most loyal believer. The destruction of the First Era had made Yi Zichen's memories of the God Emperor's tomb grow increasingly hazy. Zhou Wu wasn't fated to transcend, so it didn't matter who said this to him. So long as Zhou Wu couldn't enter the tomb, Yi Zichen was happy. Speaking of which, it seems your subordinates ignored you. As he watched Kuei Lin leave, Yang Jian arched his brows at Gu Li. His expression was playful. No matter how much Gu Li tried to clear his name, no matter how friendly he was to Yi Zichen, their enmity couldn't be resolved so easily. Even if they couldn't fight right now, Yang Jian felt good just looking at Gu Li's embarrassed expression. The others noticed this as well. Previously, Kuei Lin and the others had treated Gu Li as their leader. This time, when Kuei Lin saw him, he didn't even greet him. His lackeys didn't even look Gu Li in the eye. Is that so hard to understand? We went our separate ways, said Gu Li with a smile, completely unperturbed. I didn't expect you to be so pitiful. You've been used to the point where you're no longer of any value, so we just threw you away. It's really a waste of your previous efforts to fight against us. Yang Jian snorted mercilessly. Gu Li maintained his smile and ignored Yang Jian's mockery. Yang Jian loved to shoot his mouth off the most, and he loved to make the other party angry even more. Therefore, whenever he shot his mouth off, he could always hit the nail on the head, and seeing the other party go crazy made him feel very comfortable. In the past, He'd always been able to infuriate his opponents, but this time, it was like he'd struck cotton. This made Yang Jian feel as if he couldn't exert any strength, and he felt extremely uncomfortable in his heart. "You've met your match." The great sage patted him on the shoulder and grinned. These two brothers loved to kill each other. When it came to dealing the finishing blow, the great sage wasn't any weaker than Yang Jian. "Does it feel bad?" TSK, TSK, TSK. You want to provoke others, but you end up looking like you're eating SH*T. It really looks good. "Get lost." Yang Jian glared at the great sage. The great sage glanced at him, then took 2 steps back. Oh, you're getting angry from embarrassment? This sort of scene had become a daily occurrence for the two brothers. The great emperors couldn't help but shake their heads. Yi Zichen, however, looked calmly at Gu Li. When Gu Li sensed his gaze, he turned and smiled. They went their separate ways. It was easy to say, but who knew how many more secrets were hidden here? When he saw that Gu Li didn't seem willing to share the details of how he'd split with Kuei Lin, Yi Zichen didn't dwell on it. He looked up at the secret room and frowned. They said this was the entrance to the inner palace, but everyone's stuck here. Aside from the 4 exits leading back to the outer palace, there's no other way out. Pu Jingwan crossed her arms. "We got here a bit earlier than you, and this secret room is half sealed. There's no way out of the inner palace. Furthermore, we didn't get here early. Before we got here, there are already quite a few people here, so they must have already... We've pretty much scouted this place, but as you can see, more and more people are coming, yet no one has found an exit. If there's an exit, it's that secret door, but even now, we still don't know how to open it." This underground chamber was actually a very ordinary chamber. It was square and had no decorations. At this moment, many experts could be seen searching the surroundings of the secret chamber, as if they were trying to find the hidden mechanism inside. A secret door? Yi Zichen arched his brows. "Over there." Pu Jingwan gestured at the crowd. That was where Kuei Lin and the others had gone. "There seems to be a secret door over there, but we still don't know how to open it." When Yi Zichen heard that, he looked at the crowd for a long while, but didn't move. There were so many people gathered around the secret door. Even Kuei Lin and the others had gone over, but they still hadn't found a way to open it. It was obvious that the mechanism wasn't there. "Brother Monin." Yi Zichen suddenly called out to Go Monin. This was the closest place to the inner palace, and there might even be a psychopathic, murderous demon lurking among the crowd. Everyone was on full alert, but Go Monin seemed lost in thought. Go Monin clearly froze for a moment, then came to his senses. "What is it, Brother Yi? You don't look too good," said Yi Zichen kindly. Yi Zichen reminded him kindly, then dropped the subject. "How did you discover this secret room?" "I heard it from others. Didn't I tell you on the way here?" said Go Monin. Oh, I forgot." Yi Zichen laughed awkwardly, but didn't say anything else. Afterwards, he clasped his hands behind his back and paced aimlessly around the room. There really was nothing special about it. Whether it was the spaciousness of the room or the smooth, clean walls, there was nothing special about it. Yi Zichen couldn't help but recall the scene in the hallway. It was so ordinary that he couldn't figure out what was going on. However, Yi Zichen was sure that this was the only way into the inner palace. "How did you get out of the hallway?" Yi Zichen suddenly knit his brows. "The hallway? Do you think this place has anything to do with the hallway?" The Ocean Emperor's expression grew stern. "I meditated in the hallway for an hour, then came out." "We did the same." The other great emperors, including Yang Jian and the great sage, nodded. "Meditate." Yi Zichen thought they'd say they'd broken through some sort of formation, because he suspected that the passageway might be controlled by a spiritual formation. "Why meditate?" Yi Zichen furrowed his brows. There were words written at the top of the hallway. "Quiet. That's telling us to quiet down," said Pu Jingwan matter-of-factly. The others nodded. Yi Zichen's eyes suddenly lit up, but before he could say anything, they heard a young lowly's voice. "Everyone, could you please quiet down?" The lowly's voice was very soft, but it was very penetrating. The people in the secret room inexplicably quietened down. Then, a lowly girl walked to the center of the secret room, and beside her was a strong man who was more than 2 meters tall. Never mind the man's cultivation. Just his appearance alone was enough to intimidate them. I presume you've all walked through the hallway. The way I see it, the God Emperor buried here was someone who liked peace and quiet. The secret passageway is right in front of us, and you've all searched this room for a while now, but to no avail. In that case, perhaps we need peace and quiet here as well. Come, after a certain amount of time, the passageway will open on its own. That lowly, the Ocean Emperor and the other great emperors' gazes darkened. They didn't know why, but they felt a sense of pressure from her. At least one of them isn't too stupid. Just as the little Lolita finished speaking, an arrogant and sinister snort sounded from the crowd. I've already said that this place needs to be quiet, but the people here are all squeaking nonstop as if they've gone mad. The little lowly from before had already caused the people in the secret room to frown deeply. Now, there was an unfamiliar old man who spoke very rudely. This immediately caused many people in the secret room to have ugly expressions. Red Demon, someone suddenly called out. Demon Emperor Kuei Lin walked up to the old man. I never would have guessed I'd run into Senior Red Demon here. Oomph. In truth, you're probably thinking that you never would have guessed I was still alive. Red Demon's gaze was sinister, and as he spoke, he inadvertently radiated a terrifying bloodlust. Senior Red Demon, what do you mean? The Demon Emperor smiled modestly. Yi Zichen frowned. Who's Red Demon? He's from the old Demon Emperor's era. He was one of the 6 demons under his command. Everyone thought they died alongside the old Demon Emperor. I never would have guessed Red Demon was still alive, said Su Qingyan. So you're saying this senior is an extraordinary figure as well? Asked Yi Zichen. That's quite impressive. Even Emperor Bian couldn't help but exclaim in shock. When I was young, Red Demon was already famous. Let me put it this way. He's probably killed more people than you've seen. After learning the name of the old man, Red Devil, the experts in the secret room became much more obedient. They all knew very well that Hong Mo was a devil who killed without batting an eyelid in the past. Everyone. Chapter 1636. Although the Red Fiends had risen to fame in the old Demon Emperor's era, so many years had passed. His status wasn't all that high. Little Lowly didn't even need to be mentioned. She'd never even seen her before. Kuei Lin was different. He was the current emperor of the demons. The weight of his words was clearly heavier than what the little Lowly and the Red Devil Elder had said before. Everyone really did sit cross-legged on the floor. Indeed, they'd been inside for so long, but they couldn't find a way to open the secret door. In truth, Yi Zichen was thinking about the same thing little Lowly had mentioned. He nodded at the few great emperors and Yang Jian before they all sat on the floor of the secret room. Instantly, the entire room fell eerily silent. However, when they sat down, they discovered that the floor was cool and refreshing. It actually had the effect of calming them down. Big brother, didn't you say we couldn't just show ourselves? The burly man transmitted his divine sense to little Lowly. So you're saying we should just sit here and wait? Little Lowly sat obediently on the floor, but the burly man wasn't so obedient. This muscular man you've transformed into really fits your persona. He's very simple-minded. Think about how much time we have left. If those idiots in the secret room tell us the way to get in, this era might be destroyed. You're right, all right? The burly man didn't argue, but it seems the Emperor Star sensed it too. Little Lowly snuck a glance at Yi Zichen. It seems this guy isn't an idiot. It'll be easier to work with him in the future. Drip, drip, drip. When the room fell completely silent, they could clearly hear the sound of water dripping in the hallway. Yi Zichen had searched the hallway and heard the sound of water dripping, but he couldn't find any water. This room was the same, but now he knew. The sound of water dripping was actually used to keep time. It seemed Yi Zichen and little Lowly were right. The only way to reach the inner palace was through silence. Just how long are we going to sit here for? The great sage's temperament had always been restless. Back when he'd been searching for scriptures, even with Guanyin right in front of him, he'd found it hard to sit still. It hadn't even been an hour, but the great sage couldn't sit still anymore. He wriggled his body restlessly. Just stay put. If you want to try being surrounded and attacked by everyone in that secret room, you can get up right now and do whatever you want, transmitted Pu Jingwan. There were at least 40 people in the secret room, and they were all at least Emperor rank experts. Even though the great sage was the victorious fighting Buddha and loved to fight, he wasn't brainless. If he were to face so many people, he really wouldn't be a match for them. Since he couldn't win, he could only endure it. If this continued, he would really collapse. Conceal your spirit and qi. Calm your mind and focus. It could be said that Yi Zichen was in a completely meditative state. The floor of the secret room was truly amazing, and a clear stream of energy flowed through his limbs and bones. This kind of clear flow even tidied up the unstable spiritual power in his body into order. A low murmur suddenly sounded out in the quiet secret room. It wasn't just Yi Zichen. Everyone else who was in a meditative state opened their eyes. Who said that just now? Quite a few of them were furious. Entering a meditative state was rare, especially after experiencing its benefits. Those who entered a meditative state cherished it even more. Furthermore, the tranquility they'd gone through so much trouble to maintain had been shattered. For a moment, the room surged with spiritual power. Everyone looked at each other, their eyes filled with undisguised rage. Yi Zichen knit his brows. Entering a meditative state just now was truly a rare opportunity. In less than an hour, he could clearly sense that the spiritual energy in his body had been thoroughly sorted out. His modeled great Tao had even trimmed away some of the excess branches, making his Tao even more exquisite. If he'd had another hour, he might have been able to improve his great Tao of the 5 elements. How noisy! As the angry shouts rose and fell, the low murmur from before rang out in everyone's ears once again. Only then did everyone realize that the low murmur did not come from the people in the secret room. Could it be Senior God Emperor? Kuei Lin was quite perceptive. He cupped his hands in greeting. A demon? The deep voice suddenly paused. It was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry from his tone. Kuei Lin froze. This was the Transcendence Tomb. Yes, but the God Emperor was buried here. This God Emperor's relationship with the demons wasn't as harmonious as they'd imagined. The tomb could accommodate all races, yes, but the God Emperor might not. Senior, you must be the God Emperor's remnant soul. As Kuei Lin grimaced, no one would have guessed that Hong Mo, another demon, would step forward. Furthermore, his tone wasn't particularly respectful either. If you're the God Emperor's remnant soul, then you're the tomb's guide. We've been here for far too long. We don't have time to waste. Why don't you hurry up and open the secret door to the inner palace? That way, we'll be able to leave the tomb as soon as possible and not disturb your cultivation. When the others heard Hong Mo's words, they couldn't help but be stunned. As expected of one of the 6 most arrogant demons of the past, when others encountered the God Emperor's remnant soul, they had to bow and scrape humbly. Kuei Lin was a living example. However, Hong Mo didn't give him any face at all. His words even seemed to imply that he was the host. What heavy killing intent, said the low voice. You're also a demon, and you've killed quite a few people. Yes, I've killed quite a few. My hands are stained with the blood of you humans. Hong Mo's eyes blazed with arrogance. I don't like your tone, said Kuei Lin. So what if I don't like it? Since I've entered the tomb, do you think you can chase me out? Besides, this tomb doesn't belong to you. The 4 auxiliary stars selfishly buried you here. Do you really think of yourself as the master of this place? Hong Mo's words were as sharp as ever. This old man is too ruthless. Yang Jian and the others stared at the old man's words. Who would have dared speak to the God Emperor like that? Even if it was just a remnant soul. Everyone was worried that the God Emperor's remnant soul would be enraged, but it simply laughed. Your killing intent is too heavy. It's not a good thing for you. But since you're in such a hurry, I can tell you what's on your mind. I want to obtain the fortune to avenge the old demon emperor. Hong Mo didn't care that there were others around. He didn't hesitate to reveal his intentions. When he mentioned the old demon emperor, Kuei Lin's expression froze. Others didn't know about the old demon emperor situation, but he knew all too well. As soon as the Red Devil said this, Kuei Lin had an idea. Chapter 16:37. The 6 devils were the trusted subordinates of the old demon emperor and were loyal to the 6 generals under the old demon emperor. It was rumored that if the demon emperor had another 100,000 years, he'd be able to unify the 3 races thanks to his extraordinary methods and the 6 demons. Back then, the demons had been brimming with battle intent, suppressing the other 2 races. Unfortunately, good times didn't last. The demon emperor vanished without a trace, and the 6 demons vanished with him. Kuei Lin had secured his throne with the support of several demon gods, stabilizing the demons' chaotic territory. However, the demons' battle prowess was no longer as great as it had been during the demon emperor's reign. The Hongmo's appearance made many believe that the demon emperor was preparing to make a comeback at the end of this era. No one would have thought that the Red Devil would say such words. Avenge the demon emperor. Didn't that mean the rumors weren't groundless? The demon emperor really had been killed, and his 6 demons had died in battle? The Hongmo didn't care what his words made the people in the secret room think. He'd always been like this, saying whatever he wanted to say. His goal here was to obtain a fortuitous encounter and avenge the demon emperor. Revenge, muttered the god emperor's remnant soul. Although the Hongmo's words shocked the people in the secret room, they knew this wasn't a big deal to the god emperor's remnant soul. However, no one could have guessed that the god emperor's remnant soul was actually, do you know who you're seeking revenge on? I can give you some help. Everyone's expressions froze. The Hongmo hadn't expected the god emperor's remnant soul to say something like this. After a brief moment of shock, he snorted and shook his head, his entire body radiating a piercing, murderous aura. No need. I've already made up my mind. The Red Fiend knew very well who the enemy he wanted to take revenge against was. He glanced at Kuei Lin vaguely, but no one could sense the bloodlust hidden in that ordinary glance. The others couldn't sense it, but Kuei Lin could. The Hongmo knew what had happened in the past. Since that was the case, the Hongmo couldn't be allowed to live. He had to find a way to deal with him in the mausoleum. If he walked out of here alive, he'd be a huge problem for Kuei Lin to deal with. Then I wish you success. After the Divine Emperor's remnant soul chuckled, he stopped talking to the Red Fiend. In fact, it could be said that he had only spoken a few words to the Red Fiend from the beginning to the end. In an instant, the secret chamber shook violently. Under everyone's terrified expressions, the secret room that was so small that it made people feel oppressed had actually transformed into a paradise. The beautiful stream flowed slowly. The vegetation was full of life. The birds were singing, and the flowers were fragrant. It would be very difficult to find a place like this in the Peach Garden realm, even if one searched the god, Yao, and demon races. What a wonderful Peach Garden realm! Even the Ocean Sovereign and the others couldn't help but marvel at this scene. They were all high and mighty figures, but the more powerful they were, the more they couldn't relax. The Peach Blossom realm seemed to possess some sort of magical power. When one was here, one's tense nerves would involuntarily relax. The vexation of the past would also disappear, and one would only want to stay here and enjoy life. Not only that, but the comprehension of Tao techniques and the density of spiritual energy here far surpassed that of the outside world. Even though everyone here was an emperor-level expert, it would be almost impossible for them to advance any further. However, everyone here firmly believed that so long as they stayed here, in less than half a month, their shackles would be easily broken. Quite a few people had already sensed that this place was extraordinary, so they seized every moment to sit down cross-legged and comprehend the Tao. Others seemed to be immersed in life. As they gazed at the river, their eyes flashed with unprecedented mellowness. What's the meaning of this? Why did they bring us here? Yang Jian didn't pay much attention to this place. The scenery here was indeed pleasant. That was undeniable. However, he lived in the Heavenly Palace. Although the Heavenly Palace was a lower plane, he had to admit that the scenery there was far better. Even though this was a relatively pleasant rural lifestyle, it wasn't nearly as immortal as the Heavenly Palace. Yi Zichen said nothing. He simply looked around in silence. He didn't move about recklessly like the others, nor did he sit down cross-legged to comprehend the Tao of heaven and earth. How was it? Was the God Emperor impressive? Guli walked over with a smile on his face. He wasn't like the others, who spoke of the realm of peach blossoms with a hint of playfulness. He clearly knew a lot about this place. Before he entered the tomb, Guli must have told him many details about this place. "What do you mean?" asked Yizichin. "The people who came here are all aiming to transcend fate, but look at it now. Are there still 30% of them who are obsessed with fate?" Guli looked around vaguely. "That's not all. They've even let down their most basic guard. If anyone tries to attack now, who would they be? None of them can escape. Are you saying that the God Emperor's remnant soul wants us to kill each other?" Yi Zichen frowned. "You're overthinking things." "I was just making an analogy," said Guli. The way Yi Zichen saw it, not even the God Emperor's remnant soul would do such a thing. The era was about to end, and the Transcendence Mausoleum was there to give it hope. Everyone here was a peak-level expert of the three realms. If he wanted them to kill each other, then when the aura-breaking behemoth attacked, who would defend against it? Who would defend against it? However, the God Emperor's remnant soul probably knew why they'd come here. Instead of letting them into the inner palace, he sent them here. Could this be the inner palace? What exactly is the God Emperor's remnant soul trying to do? Yi Zichen couldn't help but mutter. He's trying to filter out a few people. Guli leaned against Yi Zichen. No one knew when they'd gotten so close. Now's the time for a troublemaker to ask questions. If I'm not mistaken, it should be the demon's red demon. Speaking of the red demons, I almost forgot. Are you done with your preparations? Yi Zichen instantly stiffened. Just a moment ago, he'd almost put his arm around Gu Li's shoulder. He took a few steps back. He looked at Gu Li vigilantly. Only a few people in Shui Yang, the Sea Emperor, knew about the Demon Emperor. How did Gu Li know about the Demon Emperor? It seems I said something I shouldn't have. Gu Li laughed and shrugged. Just as Gu Li pursed his lips into a smile, just as he expected, while everyone was immersed in the tranquility of this otherworldly paradise, the Red Demon, who was the most out of place, glared at them and roared angrily. "Are you messing with us?" His thunderous roar shook the hearts of everyone present, whether they were sitting cross-legged or admiring the flowers. They looked at the enraged Hong Mo in confusion. Soon after, they heard him furiously roar again. "We came here in search of the Tao of Transcendence, not to indulge ourselves. Isn't this place good?" The God Emperor's remnant soul's voice resounded through the air. The Red Demon gazed at the source of life, his gaze sharp. "I don't see anything good about this place. This is a paradise I spent my entire life creating. The spiritual energy here is far denser than the outside world, and I've comprehended all of my Tao. So long as you settle down here, you can still transcend. It's far easier to obtain than the Tao of Transcendence in the Mausoleum's inner palace. I yearn for the end of the era. The second era failed to transcend, and I don't want to see the tragedy of the third era repeat itself. I wholeheartedly thought about all of you, but now you're questioning me? Isn't it better to sit here and comprehend the Tao better than the inner palace, where there's a slim chance of survival?" The God Emperor's remnant soul's sonorous reply made many people nod in praise. They felt that the God Emperor's remnant soul was thinking about them. However, what was interesting was that those who stood on the God Emperor's remnant soul side were generally those who had immersed themselves in the realm of peach blossom when they entered. The Red Demon didn't speak. However, the determination in his gaze as he raised his head to look at the void was clear. Among those who had come to the mausoleum in search of opportunities, the Red Demon was the only one who had come here alone. It was also because he had come alone that no one could persuade him. Many people already stood on the God Emperor's remnant soul's side. They wanted to console him, but when they thought about the Red Demon, they could only swallow their words. What a stubborn person. The void suddenly distorted, and a wisp of a soul appeared in everyone's line of sight. This soul's eyes were filled with anger. From this, it could be seen that this was the God Emperor's remnant soul that had always been at odds with the Red Demon. "Greetings, Senior." Everyone, regardless of whether they were gods, Yao, or demons, bowed to the remnant soul. The God Emperor's remnant soul acted as if he hadn't seen them at all. He walked straight up to the red demon. You can't choose the path of life, yet you insist on choosing the path of death. If you enter the mausoleum, you'll most likely die. You better think this through. The God Emperor's remnant soul's anger was obvious. It seemed he'd never seen someone so stubborn before. He'd already done all he could, but the red demon wouldn't listen no matter what. So what? Said the red demon, completely unconcerned. You really are stubborn. The God Emperor's remnant soul angrily waved his hand, then glanced at the others. Do you think he thinks the same way? Don't blame me for not warning you. Even an Imperial expert will most likely die if you enter the inner palace. Senior, we'd like to take a look inside, said Ghoulie suddenly, cupping his hands respectfully. While everyone else fell silent, Ghoulie's words caused a red demon to glance at him again. The God Emperor's remnant soul narrowed his eyes, as if he were furious at yet another ignorant brat. After that, he looked at his surroundings once more. Soon after, he couldn't restrain his gaze and nodded. Fine. Since you're willing to die, I won't stop you. As soon as the God Emperor's remnant soul finished speaking, the surrounding space split into two. One was the Shangri-La that they were currently in. As for the space next to it, it was a place where magma was erupting, heavenly fire was falling, and lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Chapter 1638. Seeing such a shocking scene, the experts of the Peach Blossom all took a few steps back, whether intentionally or unintentionally. They could sense that there was a barrier around the peach garden. Even so, they could still feel the heat waves from the lava. There was also the demonic wind blowing the lava, the heavenly fire and red lightning that were so dense that there was almost no gap for them to pass through. They really did not have the confidence to survive such a dangerous place. Even though the God Emperor's remnant soul's meaning was clear, that the opportunity to transcend in the Transcendence Tomb was after this dangerous place. With such a tempting bargaining chip placed there, they still did not dare to show any greedy thoughts. Transcendence was tempting, but the weight of living was actually more important in their hearts. Didn't they seek a higher realm so that they could survive? If they walked forward despite knowing that it was a dangerous place for the sake of transcendence, wouldn't that be putting the cart before the horse? Moreover, the God Emperor's remnant soul had also said that as long as they cultivated in peace in this peach garden, they would have a chance to transcend. This scene is really terrifying. The great sage's fiery eyes trembled. Even though he had been refined by old Lord Taishang's pill furnace, he still trembled in the face of the scorching lava. Thank you. Just as everyone was shocked by this dangerous place, Hong Mo did not hesitate and stepped into the dangerous place. His movement was seen by everyone. Some looked down on him for overestimating himself, while others were shocked by his soaring heroism. In short, everyone looked at Hong Mo with different gazes. This kind of situation, indeed, needed someone to take the lead. Those who stayed behind would also have to judge based on Hong Mo's situation. It was a dangerous place. Pure, white, heavenly fire rained down from the sky, and the magma on the ground continued to erupt. In such a doomsday-like situation, the arrogant Hong Mo looked so small and pitiful. He carefully avoided all threats, resisted the bone-piercing demonic wind, and slowly approached the end of the dangerous place. He's halfway through. After an hour, Hong Mo had only walked half of the 1,000-meter dangerous place. Everyone was amazed at his good luck. He had not been buried in the magma for more than half of the way. They were also amazed at the difficulty of this danger zone. After all, Hong Mo's realm was relatively high among these people, but he still had not passed through this danger zone after such a long time. At this moment, the Red Fiend, who was moving forward like a boat in the sea, was suddenly struck by a bolt of red lightning. He, who was on the verge of collapse, instantly fell into the magma at the bottom. The people in the peach garden saw that he didn't even have the chance to struggle before he turned into a wisp of green smoke and perished in the magma. Is he dead? It seemed like this 1,000-meter danger zone was really not easy to pass. Even with Hong Mo's profound realm, he still had to be so careful. In the end, he still ended up with nothing left of his corpse. For a moment, the Emperor Realm experts were in an uproar. They were all thinking that they would never step into that dangerous place. You've seen the results. If you still don't believe it, you can go over and give it a try. Of course, before that, I would like to kindly remind you that the fortune behind this danger zone is reserved for the Emperor's star. Yizichin didn't know why, but he saw a hint of ridicule in the god Emperor's eyes. He naturally didn't recognize the second era's master of the stars, but the way he saw it, if he was the Emperor's star's master, his personality shouldn't be like this. This was especially true in a moment of life and death. Even if he didn't want to bemoan the state of the universe and pity the fate of mankind, he shouldn't be joking like this. Just as Yizichin was wondering what the god Emperor's smile meant, Guli led his two imperial emperors and Enlil into the danger zone without the slightest hesitation. Let's go. The celestial emperor's remnant soul's deterrence clearly had no effect on them. When the celestial emperor's remnant soul saw this scene, there was a flash of anger in its eyes. Just as it was about to say something, the little lowly and the burly man also walked into the danger zone. Reckless fools. They hadn't expected Hong Mo's death to spur even more people into the danger zone. The people in the peach garden looked at them as if they were idiots. They watched as they slowly pushed into the end of the danger zone, until they died in the danger zone. Gu Li and the others died. At the very least, Yizichin saw Gu Li and the others die in the lava. What's more, they'd taken less time than Hong and Mo, so they died a bit faster. That was especially true of the little girl and the brawny man. Within 100 breaths of time, they died in the lava. That bastard Gu Li died. Yang Jian's eyes widened. He didn't know what to say. The way he saw it, Gu Li's death was a good thing. However, he'd always believed that good people didn't live long, while bad people live for 100 years. He really didn't believe Gu Li could die here so easily. He felt even more pity for Enlil. That girl with eyes so pure they seemed capable of cleansing one's soul. She'd also died in that death trap along with Gu Li, that treacherous villain. Why didn't you stop them? At least stop Enlil, said Pu Jingwan. He didn't care too much about Gu Li's death, but Enlil's death pained him to the core. As she spoke, Pu Jingwan glanced at Yizichin. She knew he'd always treated Enlil like his own little sister. Let's go. They never would have guessed that Yizichin, who'd been silent for so long, would suddenly say something like this. The great emperors around him froze. Yang Jian and the great sage looked at him in disbelief. Yizi, are you stupid? Said Yang Jian helplessly. I think staying here is pretty good. Monkey, don't you think so? The great sage glanced at the lava, then scratched his head. I think what Yang Jian said makes sense. Let's go. Little did they know, Yizichin didn't listen to them at all. He walked straight into the lava. When Yang Jian and the great sage saw this, although they didn't want to go, since Yizichin had gone in, they couldn't just ignore him. The other great emperors felt the same way. As the Emperor's star, they had to ensure his safety. Furthermore, they also felt that Yizichin wasn't the type to ignore the consequences. Since he'd chosen to go in, he might have discovered something they hadn't. So it wasn't an illusion. Hong Mo's death had impacted Yizichin somewhat, but Gu Li's death made him feel like something was wrong. He refused to believe that Gu Li had died. Especially after Hong Mo's death, Gu Li had resolutely chosen to enter this place. He'd even brought Enlil with him. This made him feel even more certain that something was wrong. Earlier, when they'd been outside, Yizichin had assumed that what they'd seen was an illusion. Now that he'd truly entered this place, he discovered that the Yao winds, the lava, the heavenly flames, the rolling thunder, and the flashing lightning were all real. However, compared to what they'd felt in the Peach Blossom Land, it wasn't as turbulent as he'd imagined. The lava was scorching hot, and so was the heavenly flames. However, they weren't strong enough to harm Emperor-level experts. In that case, it was obvious that the heavenly flames weren't an illusion. However, the deaths of Hong Mo, Gu Li, and the others were fake. Yizi, Yang Jian, and the great sage were right behind him. They'd been so worried about Yizichin's safety that they hadn't paid much attention to the real situation. You're all here? Yizichin glanced at the people behind him. Including the venerable of numinous treasure, all of Yizichin's alliance's experts had entered the danger zone. Let's go. Be careful, this place. Just as Yang Jian was about to pull Yi Zichen back, he realized that the heavenly flames and red lightning weren't as terrifying as they'd seemed. What's going on? It seems we were set up by that God Emperor's remnant soul. Xianji watched the scene unfold before her. As the heavenly fire fell, she reached out and caught it. The pure, white heavenly flames burned on her palm, but they didn't harm her in the slightest. I thought the heavenly flames and red lightning were a bit strange. The white heavenly flames and red lightning aren't the ultimate manifestations of the Tao of fire and lightning. Hong Mo's cultivation isn't any lower than ours, yet he was struck by the red lightning and died in the lava without being able to resist at all. That's very strange. Indeed, Empress Su Qingyan held a handful of heavenly flames in her hand. When they landed in her palm, they only felt warm. They didn't contain any offensive power. Then she glanced at the peach blossom land behind them. The experts who'd remained behind were still staring at them in terror. Why did the God Emperor's remnant soul do this? What's in it for him to leave us there? As far as I know, the God Emperor of the Second Era was a man who cared for the world. He shouldn't have done something so detrimental to the Third Era. The God Emperor naturally wouldn't, but what about others? Laughed the venerable of numinous treasure. Others? The Jade Lake Palace Master and the others froze, then recalled that the God Emperor had been buried in the mausoleum. So you're saying that this remnant soul isn't the God Emperor's remnant soul at all, but actually, in essence, the Second Era and Third Era could be considered the same entity. The Second Era's Master of the Stars had yet to transcend, and his auxiliary fated stars had transformed into the Nirvana stars. Before the Second Era's Master of the Stars was buried in the mausoleum, he sealed the demon emperor away. But who knows where he was sealed? Asked the venerable of numinous treasure. In the primordial era, the demons had wantonly invaded the lands of the God realm and Yao realm. The Yao and gods had no choice but to join forces to defend themselves. However, the demons were too powerful. Even though the Yao gods had joined forces, they still couldn't stop their invasion. Tens of thousands of races were plunged into misery and suffering. The God Emperor, also known as the Second Era's Master of the Stars, sealed the demon emperor away with his own soul in order to put an end to everything. Without the demon emperor, the demons fell into internal strife, while the Yao and gods breathed a sigh of relief. Later, the four great auxiliary stars buried the God Emperor in the transcending mausoleum, but indeed, no one knew where the demon emperor was sealed. That remnant soul really is the Second Era's demon emperor, exclaimed the Ocean Empress. Chapter 1639. We're here. They could see the danger zone in the peach blossom garden, but once they entered, it wasn't all that intimidating. The lava was real, and it was a separate space. When Yi Zichen and the others reached the end of the danger zone, they sensed a barrier around the lava. The journey wasn't as difficult as they'd seen in the peach blossom garden. They passed through the danger zone almost without incident. We're here. Yi Zichen wanted to be the first to pass through, but the Ocean Emperor stopped him. We don't know what's going on outside the barrier. It's best if we go first. The other great emperors nodded. They naturally didn't want to be the first to transcend. Only the fated would learn of such opportunities. Besides, they were already friends with Yi Zichen, and unlike the God Emperor, they weren't obsessed with transcendence. They were simply worried about what was going on outside the barrier, so they decided to go first. Given their higher cultivations, even if something unexpected happened, they'd be able to react appropriately. They'd deal with it appropriately. When he saw the great emperor's expressions, Yi Zichen understood how important he was to them. The end of an era was imminent. They'd already come this far, and were only one step away from transcendence. They didn't want anything to happen to Yi Zichen. It was inevitable. All right, then I'll have to trouble you, emperors. The Ocean Emperor was the first to pass through the barrier, followed by the Jade Lake Palace Master and the others. Xianji and Su Qingyan brought up the rear, while Yi Zichen walked among the great emperors. When they passed through the barrier, he discovered that there really was another world beyond. It was different from the inner palace they'd imagined. After passing through the barrier, they saw a majestic mountain range. Clouds and mist swirled around the peak of the mountain, but they could vaguely make out a palace standing at the very top. As for Gu Li and company, who'd arrived before Yi Zichen, they were all at the foot of the mountain. When Yi Zichen and company appeared, Hong Mo glanced at them disdainfully, as if surprised that they'd come as well. The little lowly nodded towards Yi Zichen and company with a smile. The Hulk beside her remained expressionless the entire time, and stood beside the little lowly like a bodyguard to protect her. "They're here." Only Gu Li and the others walked over to Yi Zichen. And Lu ran over, smiling like an angel. Big brother Zichen. Her sweet laughter melted everyone's hearts. Pu Jingwan, in particular, let out a long sigh of relief when she saw Lu alive and kicking. She felt terrible when she'd seen Lu swallowed up by the lava. "Yes." Yi Zichen rubbed Xiao An's head with a smile, then walked over. "I couldn't tell you the details when I was there, but I feel like as long as I walk in, you should understand some inside information. It seems like the two of us are actually connected. Don't try to get close to us. When we saw you die in Peach Blossom, we were so happy." Yang Jian snorted. Gu Li completely ignored Yang Jian's insults. It always felt like he was hitting cotton. That feeling of powerlessness made Yang Jian very unhappy. Right now, he wanted nothing more than to pick up his lance and fight Gu Li for real. Only then would he be able to vent all the pent-up anger in his heart. "All right, old Yang." Yi Zichen gestured for Yang Jian to restrain himself, then turned to Gu Li. As expected, Gu Li knew some inside information. From her conversation when they'd first arrived in Peach Blossom to Hong Mo's death in the lava, Gu Li's resolute decision to step into danger. When Yi Zichen recalled what the Venerable of Numinous Treasure had said in the lava, he couldn't help but arch his brows. That remnant soul was actually the Demon Emperor's? Gu Li smiled, but said nothing, but judging from his expression, he was absolutely certain. Yi Zichen glanced at Hong Mo and the others. "You know about it too? The Demon Emperor's remnant soul?" Hong Mo blinked innocently. Hong Mo pursed his lips and snorted. "So long as you're not blind, you'd be able to tell. Then you, after all, everyone thought it was the God Emperor's remnant soul because of Hong Mo. Hong Mo had called it the God Emperor at first, and the remnant soul hadn't retorted. That's why everyone thought it was the God Emperor's remnant soul. What's wrong with me? What's the point of keeping someone who can't tell the truth? No matter what I say, they have the right to decide. Those with brains will naturally see the truth. As for those ignorant fools, they're not worthy of transcending good fortune." Hong Mo's words were as sharp as ever. It was hard to tell if he was angry or not, but whenever he spoke, he always radiated a terrifying, murderous aura. But this "not worthy" actually resonated with Gu Li and the Ocean Emperor. Far too many people had come to the Transcendence Tomb. Whether they were nameless hermits, seniors in deep seclusion, or emperors looking to test their luck, there was an endless stream of people entering the tomb. There was a continuous stream of people entering the tomb, all of them wanting a piece of the Transcendence cake. But if they really thought about it, were they worthy? Although the Transcendence Tomb was supposed to accommodate all races, it was actually just a place of good fortune for the Master of the Stars. The Ocean Emperor and the other Imperial Emperors didn't even want to come here. In terms of cultivation, couldn't they compare to Imperial Emperors? In terms of fame, they were the emperors of the sacred beasts and divine mountains. Even so, they didn't want to get a share of Transcendence's good fortune. It wasn't that they didn't have extravagant hopes of transcendence. It was that they could see reality clearly. As for those delusional idiots who wanted to get a share of Transcendence's good fortune, that was nothing but a pipe dream. Senior Hong Mo, from your tone, you don't sound like someone who can't see reality clearly. Why did you insist on coming here? Gu Li suddenly bowed to Hong Mo. "I'm a demon as well, and I've always revered you 6 demons as my seniors. The old Demon Emperor's sudden seclusion makes me feel like there's a sinister plot going on. In particular, the disappearance of the 6 of you makes me feel like there's more to it than meets the eye." Hong Mo glanced at Gu Li. His entire body radiated a murderous aura. Even though he didn't reveal his aura, his gaze was still extremely oppressive. Guli didn't avert his gaze. Even though he sensed the vast sea of blood, he remained neither servile nor overbearing. I've asked around and found out that the Demon Emperor really did die. You said you wanted to avenge him, so you should know full well that the person who attacked him will definitely view you as a thorn in their side. Why didn't you choose to hide? Why did you suddenly show yourself? He's trying to flatter me again. Yang Jian twitched his mouth. Yi Zichen glanced at Yang Jian, then shook his head. For some reason, Yi Zichen felt like Guli wasn't trying to flatter him. He seemed to be trying to confirm something through these words. I naturally have no interest in Transcendence's good fortune. With that, everyone subconsciously glanced at Hong and Mo, sensing their gazes. Hong and Mo snorted. You don't need to look at me like that. For cultivators, transcendence is a supreme existence. This is especially true for those of us who've been crowned emperors for far too long. Who wouldn't want it if they could? That's understandable. However, I'm not someone who doesn't understand the situation, nor am I someone who can't see reality clearly. I naturally won't dwell on it and add to my worries. My goal in coming here is simple. I just want to get a closer look at the current Demon Emperor. Unfortunately, he's not as outstanding as I imagined him to be. When he said, not outstanding, Hong Mo's eyes flashed with blood-red light. Yi Zichen sensed Hong Mo's aura and surged uncontrollably. Yi Zichen guessed that Hong Mo's hands were stained with at least several million drops of blood. Furthermore, he could sense Hong Mo's hatred for Kuei Lin. He knew. Hong Mo most likely knew that Kuei Lin had used underhanded means to seize the Demon Emperor's position. He also knew many secrets that no one else knew. It seems you're. Just as Guli was about to speak, he felt the barrier behind him ripple. He swallowed the words he was about to say and concealed them well. Hong Mo did the same. Just as Yi Zichen and the others had entered, he sat cross-legged on the ground and ignored everyone. Everyone in the hall behaved very naturally, as if the previous conversation had never taken place. Before long, more people entered the barrier. Yi Zichen saw that it was Go Monin and the Demon Emperor's entourage. However, compared to the Demon Emperor's entourage, they seemed to be missing a few people. There were a few other Emperor-level experts, all of whom had brains. They'd seen so many people die in the lava, yet there were still people heading into the danger zone, especially since those who'd chosen to enter were relatively famous. It was entirely possible that there was something fishy about the lava. They'd gambled correctly. The Emperor-level experts' eyes lit up with excitement. Clearly, they were glad they'd made the right decision, and that they were one step closer to transcendence. Perhaps they really did have a chance at transcendence. Just as I expected, laughed Kuei Lin. He'd chosen to come because he'd seen Gu Li and Yi Zichen, the pioneers. He didn't know much about the others, but he knew the Ocean Emperor very well. The two of them were old rivals, and the moment he saw the Ocean Sovereign die, he felt a chill run down his spine. The instant he saw her die, Kuei Lin decided to enter. Just as he'd expected, the danger zone wasn't nearly as terrifying as the Peach Garden had seemed. Brother Yi, Go Monin walked over and smiled. I've always thought you were extraordinary. How could someone who created the 10th Divine mount and die so easily? As expected, you're still alive. Brother Monin, you trust me quite a bit. Yi Zichen smiled and nodded. Haha, fellow Taoists, I wonder if we can enter the mountain now. At this moment, the few Imperial Realm experts hurriedly opened their mouths. However, the moment they opened their mouths, everyone looked at them as if they were looking at idiots. Neither Yi Zichen's group nor the Demon Emperor's entourage mentioned this. Chapter 1640. Emperor-level experts stood at the apex of the Three Realms pyramid. Whether in terms of talent or circumstances, those who could reach this level were outstanding geniuses. On the outside, they might be overlords who were revered by tens of thousands of people, but inside the tomb, they were juniors. When they noticed the Imperial Emperors watching them, they suddenly understood. If they could enter the tomb, how could they possibly have run into these people? It wasn't that they were stupid. Rather, they'd been blinded by the opportunity before them. They knew they'd ask stupid questions, so they said no more and quietly walked to the edge of the mountain. These imperial emperors weren't familiar with the emperors before them. They were strong on the outside, but here they were weak. They had no choice but to stick together. At least they have some brains. Demon Emperor Kuei Lin snorted coldly as he watched the inconsequential immortal emperors depart. Then he glanced at Yi Zichen with interest, but in the blink of an eye, he sensed several auras lock onto him. His expression grew more and more playful. Alliance head Yi no. Star-Lord Yi. Kuei Lin suddenly corrected himself. Star-Lord Yi, you've disguised yourself quite well. If I hadn't entered this tomb, I wouldn't have guessed you were one of heaven's 2 chosen emperors. When Guli told me you were, I didn't really believe him. Then why do you believe me now? Asked Yi Zichen openly. The others at the foot of the mountain looked over as well. At their level of cultivation, they'd more or less heard of the Emperor's Star. They connected the actions of the other great emperors to Kuei Lin's words. The Emperor's Star. Although Kuei Lin had said, Star-Lord, everyone present had already guessed the gist of it. He's the Emperor's Star, muttered one of the emperors. One of the emperors muttered, then looked at Yi Zichen with burning eyes. The Emperor's Star's starlight could be stolen. God Emperor Zhou Wu was the best example. The Emperor's Star's cultivation wasn't high, but if they could steal Yi Zichen's starlight, just as they revealed the slightest hint of hostility, they sensed several auras lock onto them. Every single one of these auras was locked onto by an imperial emperor, and the killing intent they radiated instantly dispelled any thoughts they might have. If they wanted to touch Yi Zichen's starlight, they'd have to face countless insurmountable mountains. These brainless fellows actually have ideas about your starshine. Kuei Lin narrowed his eyes and sneered disdainfully. As a demon emperor, he could sense the hidden hostility clearly, even if it wasn't directed at him. Even I wouldn't dare feel this way when facing the people around Star-Lord Yi. Really, Star-Lord, Yi doesn't want me to take care of them for you? The Imperial Realm experts' expressions instantly froze. They cautiously released their auras. If the Demon Emperor really attacked them, they definitely wouldn't sit still and wait for their deaths, even though the outcome was still death. If you want, of course I don't mind. Yi Zichen smiled indifferently. You guys are fighting to the death. No matter how I look at it, it's a win for me. Star-Lord Yi really has a good mind. No wonder he could take another Imperial Star under his command. Demon Emperor Kuei Lin swept his gaze over Guli. I imagine that when Star-Lord Yi ignored the Yao's objections and insisted on protecting him, you already knew this would happen. Star-Lord Yi's schemes, Kuei Lin pay. Respect. Huh. Yi Zichen chuckled, but didn't explain. It was obvious that Kuei Lin and Gu Li's relationship was strained. It was likely that they'd had a major political disagreement, which was why Gu Li had chosen to leave the Demon Emperor's alliance. Now that he was with Yi Zichen, Kuei Lin misunderstood that Yi Zichen had recruited Gu Li. But none of that mattered. The demons were a thorn in Yi Zichen's side, especially because of his relationship with the old Demon Emperor. In the future, he and Kuei Lin were bound to clash. If Kuei Lin still treated Gu Li as his leader, Yi Zichen wouldn't be able to carry out his plans without worry because of Enlu. Gu Li had left the Demon Emperor's alliance. That was for the best. Besides, he was more concerned about what Kuei Lin had said about the people around Yi Zichen. Earlier, the Demon Emperor said it wasn't convenient for you to attack me because of my people. Are you saying that if I didn't have them by my side, you would? Star-Lord Yi, do you think that's necessary? Kuei Lin laughed calmly. The Emperor's Star's radiance is an important bargaining chip for transcendence. Who wouldn't covet it? F*CKU. I'll chop you up right now. Yang Jian hefted his blade and was about to attack, but the Demon Emperor's subordinates weren't to be trifled with. As soon as Yang Jian moved, they unleashed their auras. The spiritual energy of the two alliances collided. A great battle was on the verge of erupting. To their surprise, Yi Zichen and the Demon Emperor raised their hands at the same time. Only then did Kuei Lin laugh. Star-Lord Yi, you want to fight me here? I don't think that's necessary. I'm just saying the truth that others wouldn't dare say. If you don't believe me, you can ask those people behind you. Do they dare say that if the Emperor's Star's radiance was right in front of them, they wouldn't be tempted? Kuei Lin, watch your words. roared the Ocean Emperor. I've hit the nail on the head. Shuiyang, this isn't the Sea of Innocence. There's no sea here. Do you really think I'm afraid of you? As he spoke, Kuei Lin's aura grew stronger and stronger. I only sent a strand of my divine will. Little Sheng, do you really think you can talk to me like that? You're welcome to try. The Ocean Emperor didn't say anything more. She activated the 3 sea god sets. In the blink of an eye, the air around the mountain range became saturated with water vapor. The air was so humid that even their clothes felt damp. Ocean Emperor, don't lower yourself to his level. His psychological attacks are useless, said Yi Zichen with a laugh. He might not know this, but I'm his son-in-law of the Sea of Innocence, and you're my father-in-law. Even if I were to suspect someone else, I'd never suspect you. Don't you think so? So you're suspecting me? Xianji arched her brows. You're my auntie. Then your daughter and I are sworn brothers. Besides, didn't you say you were going to marry her to me? That makes me half a son-in-law. Look at me. It's not like you don't know my relationship with Su Yan. That's not to mention Lu Jing. We shared a bed, even though she was just a ghost back then. By the time Yi Zichen finished his explanation, it seemed he and the great emperors were all son-in-law. In the end, only the Hermit Emperor and Great Emperor Chao Feng gaped. Yi Zichen glanced at them. I really can't say for sure about the two of you. Crap, it seems I'll have to go have a daughter, said Great Emperor Chao Feng. Little friend Yi, I have a granddaughter. She's 16 years old. Don't say any more. 28. 280s. Chapter 1641. Yi Zichen's natural paranoia was nowhere to be found. Kuei Lin was just testing the waters. He naturally didn't think he could break up Yi Zichen's alliance with just a few words, but planting a seed of doubt was good. However, the Demon Emperor hadn't anticipated Yi Zichen's relationship with the other emperors. Clearly, he couldn't shake their internal relationship now. The Demon Emperor seemed to lose interest in tangling with Yi Zichen. He crossed his arms and walked to the barrier at the foot of the mountain. You know how to make a fool of yourself, huh? He ran off. Yang Jian glanced at the departing Demon Emperor. He'd known this would happen the moment the Demon Emperor tried to attack him. Their alliance wasn't like the Demon Emperors. They were a union of mutual benefit, and their relationship was far more complicated than the Demon Emperor had imagined. If he could destroy their alliance with just a few words, it would have fallen apart long ago. Have you noticed that Kuei Lin has a few fewer people with him than when we first arrived? Pu Jingwan glanced at the Demon Emperor's subordinates. Xianji laughed coldly. They're most likely in the Peach Blossom Land. You can't even control your own subordinates, yet you still want to ruin our relationship? Snorted Bayan. Kuei Lin heard all of this, but he didn't want to waste any more time with Yi Zichen and the others, so he naturally didn't respond. Some of Kuei Lin's subordinates had indeed remained in the Peach Blossom Land, but most of them weren't his trusted subordinates. Even if those idiots died in the graveyard, it didn't matter to him. That's all you've got? Suddenly, a translucent remnant soul floated past the foot of the mountain. When it appeared, everyone's expressions froze. If they weren't mistaken, this was the remnant of the Second Era's Star Lord God Emperor. The remnant's soul looked at the crowd with some regret. He really was the God Emperor buried here. When the tomb opened, he'd sensed countless experts pouring into it, but less than a tenth of them had actually made it to his side. Are they all left on his side? Him. He was obviously referring to the remnant soul in the Peach Blossom Land, the Demon Emperor's remnant soul. Everyone nodded. By the time they'd reached the foot of the mountain, they'd already known that the remnant soul was the Demon Emperor's remnant soul. However, the Emperor-class experts were still in a daze. When they saw the remnant soul of the God Emperor, their eyes revealed a strange look. After a while, they finally understood. When they looked at the peach garden outside the danger zone, they widened their eyes in fear. What a pity. The God Emperor's remnant soul couldn't help but lament. Those who entered the tomb were all top-notch experts of the three realms. Staying at the Demon Emperor's side was already a foretelling of their fates. The era was about to come to an end. Any one of these Thear-cranked experts would have a considerable combat strength in a great battle. How could the remnant soul of the God Emperor, who cared about the world, bear to lose such a great general? However, Even if he couldn't bear to do so, he couldn't save those who were left behind by the Demon Emperor. This was the agreement between him and the Demon Emperor's remnant soul. He couldn't break it. Moreover, he was only left with a wisp of remnant soul. What could he do? The only thing he could do was to feel regret and heartache. Senior, are you the God Emperor? Although Yizichin already knew, he still asked for confirmation. The God Emperor's remnant soul glanced at Yizichin. As if he'd sensed something special about the youth he was talking to, the remnant soul smiled. I'm no longer the God Emperor. Right now, I'm nothing more than a wisp of remnant soul in this mausoleum. You can say I'm your junior's guide. The more the remnant soul said this, the more it proved he was the God Emperor of yesteryear. The people at the foot of the mountain were more or less delighted. If they could see the God Emperor, that meant they really weren't far from transcending good fortune. Senior, the path to transcending good fortune lies in this mountain, right? Asked the Emperor expert. Yes. The God Emperor's remnant soul nodded without hesitation. The Emperor's eyes lit up, but when Kuei Lin saw them, he sneered. They were still delusional enough to dream of transcending good fortune? He really didn't know whether to call them stupid or naive. However, the God Emperor's remnant soul suddenly changed the subject. The Emperor expert and the surrounding monarchs' gazes focused on the remnant soul floating in the air. It couldn't be that something unexpected was about to happen, could it? At a time like this, the God Emperor's remnant soul had already said that the path to transcending good fortune lay on this mountain. The last thing they wanted to hear was the word however. Whenever that word appeared, there was bound to be a problem. I can tell you're nervous? The God Emperor's remnant soul's lips curled into a smile. There's no need to be like that. In truth, I just want to tell you that the path to transcending good fortune is indeed here. However, it won't allow you to truly step into the transcendence realm. Their existence will allow you to deepen your understanding of the Tao. As for whether or not you can transcend, that's up to you. Senior, when we were in the Peach Blossom Garden, that remnant soul said that only Emperor stars could transcend. Is that true? Asked the Emperor. Although emperors had the lowest cultivation levels, and their questions were sometimes idiotic, this question struck a chord with most of the people present. None of them were Emperor stars, but they all had hopes of transcending good fortune. You could say that, but it's not absolute. No matter who asked the question, the God Emperor's remnant soul answered in a friendly manner. However, his response caused Yi Zichen and Gu Li to look at each other. The other emperors looked at each other in bewilderment. It wasn't absolute. Didn't that mean that even those who weren't Emperor stars could transcend? Then why had Han Nan told Yi Zichen that only one person could transcend, and that he could only be a candidate for the Emperor star? Could it be that the first era, which had already transcended, was wrong? Yi Zichen couldn't recall Han Nan, but he remembered what he'd said. The God Emperor's remnant soul's answer completely overturned that theory. While everyone was still in shock, the remnant soul of the Celestial Emperor told them what he wanted to say. Transcendence refers to truly transcending the world. You're no longer bound by the laws of the world. I'm sure you all understand this after reaching your level, especially after mastering the domain. The others nodded, and the God Emperor's remnant soul explained in detail like a teacher. The Emperor star is chosen by the heavens. Whether it's the laws or the world itself, everything leans toward him. This is his destiny. Everything goes smoothly for the Emperor star. Even the shackles of his cultivation don't exist. This is the Emperor star's good fortune. As a result, when the Emperor star transcends, he receives pity. His chances of transcending are much higher than ordinary people's. In truth, transcendence isn't even considered a realm. It's transcendent, like the Creator looking down on the world. So long as you can take the final step that binds you, anyone can transcend. Quite a few people gnashed their teeth in hatred. Everyone here was a proud son of heaven. But even so, when faced with the shackles of cultivation, they were at their wits' end. The Emperor star, on the other hand, didn't experience the shackles of cultivation, and the laws leaned toward him. This wasn't fair at all. However, there was no such thing as absolute fairness in the world. The Emperor Star's remnant soul had already said that this was their destiny. This was the Emperor Star's fate. But the God Emperor's remnant soul had also said that the Emperor Star's transcendence wasn't absolute. That meant that ordinary people like them were actually on the same starting line when they transcended. At most, it would be much more difficult than the Emperor Star's transcendence, but it wasn't impossible. Senior, do you have any basis for saying this? Ghoulie suddenly took 2 steps forward. In the past, he'd never been this type of person, but the God Emperor's remnant soul's words completely upended everything he knew. The only true era to transcend was the first era. Even Ghoulie didn't know about this. So why did the God Emperor's remnant soul, who hadn't even transcended, know? Basis? The God Emperor glanced at Ghoulie. Naturally, he could tell that Ghoulie possessed the Emperor Star's celestial fate. Then he understood that the heavens had chosen 2 emperors in the third era. However, he found it strange that the heavens had chosen 2 emperors to live so harmoniously in the same place. The heavens had chosen 2 emperors for the sole purpose of having the 2 Emperor Stars compete for the best. However, he was already a remnant soul, so he didn't care too much about Ghoulie and Yi Zichen's relationship. His task of leaving his remnant soul in this world was to answer the questions of those who entered the tomb and open the final barrier of the tomb for them. The fact that the second era hasn't transcended is the best evidence, said the God Emperor's remnant soul. It hadn't transcended, but it was the best evidence. Everyone was dumbfounded by this inexplicable statement. Even the little girl and the brawny man knit their brows as they looked at the remnant soul floating in the air. The God Emperor's remnant soul was obviously referring to Ghoulie's question. In other words, he knew that the God Emperor knew about the existence of those who hadn't transcended. But if someone had transcended, then the second era hadn't succeeded. Yeezy, you're smart. Do you understand what he's saying? Yang Jian didn't understand the God Emperor's remnant soul at all. He couldn't help but transmit his divine sense to Yi Zichen. I don't understand either. Yi Zichen was dumbfounded as well. The fact that the God Emperor hadn't transcended was the best evidence. He didn't understand either. From the looks of it, the other great emperors were clearly conversing with each other. Their eyes brimmed with confusion, but the remnant soul in the sky smiled like a human. The second era could transcend, but I personally killed any hope of transcending. His words were so vague that they were incomprehensible. However, as soon as he said this, several people's expressions froze. Yi Zichen, who'd been listening to the God Emperor's remnant soul's words, seemed to realize something. He glanced at the peach garden behind him, then at the God Emperor's remnant soul. Killed. Chapter 1642. Those who weren't Emperor Stars could still transcend. The God Emperor's remnant soul's words ignited a glimmer of hope in everyone's hearts. Even the Ocean Emperor and the others felt their hearts burn with passion. Transcendence. If they could, who would give up on it? Senior. Ghoulie pursed his lips and looked at the God Emperor's remnant soul with an unfriendly gaze. He could sense the change in everyone's gazes when the God Emperor revealed his secrets. Their gazes were filled with passion and ambition. Before this, the palace had been prepared for him and Yi Zichen, but now it was prepared for everyone else. This wasn't good news for the two of them. I know what you think of me. In the second era, I was the Emperor Star too, but the truth is the truth. I won't cover it up just because I'm a Star Lord like you, said the God Emperor's remnant soul righteously. Even though it was just a wisp, everyone could sense his overwhelming righteousness. That was just how he was like. Yi, why do I feel like the God Emperor's remnant soul is even more terrifying than the Demon Emperor's remnant soul? With just a few words, everyone's hearts are on the verge of exploding. Yang Jian, the great sage, and Yi Zichen were close friends. None of them were as close as they were. Yang Jian sent Yi Zichen a subtle transmission. The great sage and Pu Jingwan joined in as well. They were all talking about the same thing. The Ocean Emperor and the others are tempted too, said Pu Jingwan. Let's stick together for the rest of the operation. We have to be on guard against them. Yi Zichen glanced at the Ocean Emperor and the others. Seriously, He could still feel the scorching gazes from the ocean's sovereign and the others. I trust them. To his surprise, Yi Zichen only glanced at them for a moment before retracting his gaze. He could understand their burning gazes. At their level, who dared say they didn't covet the Transcendence realm? If Transcendence experts were ordinary, Zhou wouldn't have gone crazy like that. It was normal for them to look at him like that. If they were so indifferent as to ignore him, that would be strange. For example, Go Monin. From start to finish, Go Monin seemed invisible. His emperor-level strength made him inconspicuous. When the others asked about Transcendence, he didn't seem too emotional. Even when the remnant soul of the God Emperor said that everyone had a chance to transcend, he still had that cold expression on his face. Brother Imo Nan, you're not interested in transcending? Yi Zichen arched his brows. Brother Yi, it's impossible for me to not be interested in the transcendent realm. However, I was very clear that even if there was a chance to transcend, it wouldn't fall on my head. Since that was the case, there was no point in looking forward to it. I came here to obtain some opportunities. I'll be satisfied if I can advance from the Imperial realm to the Imperial Lord realm, said Go Monin with a faint smile. Brother Imo Nan is really sensible. Yi Zichen smiled, but said nothing. Kuei Lin couldn't help but laugh. Everyone could transcend. Even if he had already reached the realm of not showing his emotions on his face, he still couldn't help but laugh wildly. He was grateful for the sincerity of the God Emperor's remnant soul. It rekindled his hopes of giving up. The second era's transcender was their Demon Emperor. Perhaps the third era's Demon Emperor would be Kuei Lin. Senior God Emperor, when will you be able to open this barrier? The demons had never gotten along with the gods, but Kuei Lin was already calling the God Emperor's remnant soul senior. The God Emperor's remnant soul gave him confidence, and he was eager to enter the mountain range and fight against his destiny. Open it. The God Emperor's remnant soul glanced at the Demon Emperor's peach garden. He hadn't opened the barrier yet because he wanted to wait for more people to arrive. That way, they'd have a fair starting point and could fight for the treasures and opportunities to transcend. However, ever since Kuei Lin and the others had arrived, no one else had come. It seemed that no one would come again after this. Let's do it now. Are you all ready? Sighed the God Emperor's remnant soul. Everyone at the foot of the mountain was itching to go. Ready? They'd been preparing for this moment for far too long. Emperors and emperors alike had been stuck at their current cultivation for a long time. To them, the only thing that could change their cultivation was the Transcender Palace. When they heard that anyone could transcend, they couldn't wait any longer. The God Emperor's remnant soul took in everyone's gazes and floated down to the barrier at the foot of the mountain. The hand formed by his soul lightly pressed on the water-like barrier, and the barrier that enveloped the entire mountain range automatically opened like a door. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Several figures rushed into the mountain range impatiently. Every second counted, and the opportunity to transcend might fall into someone else's hands. There are some things I need to tell you all. Only after quite a few people had entered the mountain range did the God Emperor's remnant soul speak. There are treasures and fortunes beyond your imagination in this mountain range, but there are also many fierce beasts guarding these treasures and fortunes. Remember to be careful. If you don't want to put yourself in danger, leave through this door and you'll be able to leave the tomb. As he spoke, a silver door appeared 100 meters from the foot of the mountain. Once it appeared, the God Emperor's remnant soul melted into the void, vanishing without a trace. Those who had entered the mountain late were secretly glad that they had heard the warning from the remnant soul of the God Emperor. If they had entered the mountain without knowing what was going on, it would have been hard to say what would have happened. Star-Lord Yi, should we also enter the mountain? Let's split up. Yi Zichen chuckled, then looked at the great emperors. Everyone's auras are too strong. If we walk together, we might attract the attention of the mountain range's overlords. All of us here can take care of things on our own. If we split up, we might be able to get more. All right. Chao Feng, Baiyan, the Jade Lake Palace Master, Empress Su Qingyan, and the Fox Clan head, Su Wan'er, stepped into the mountains. Xianji and the Hermit Emperor didn't move. When she saw Yizichen's gaze, she arched her brows. "What's with that look? I have to keep an eye on you. I'm not too interested in the treasures in the mountains. If I follow little friend Yi, I might encounter something more interesting," said the Hermit Emperor with a smile. There were fewer and fewer people at the foot of the mountain. The two emperors by Gu Li's side entered the mountain range as well. To their surprise, Gu Li approached them. When he saw the people by Yi Zichen's side, a hint of a smile flashed through his eyes. "Well, have you thought it through?" "I've thought it through." Everyone looked at Gu Li and Yi Zichen in bewilderment. They had no idea what they were talking about, but Gu Li chuckled. Then, Chapter 1643. White snow covered the land. Outside the barrier, they could see a pitch-black mountain range, but when they stepped inside, they discovered that it was a sea of white. Heavy enough to seal off a mountain range drifted down from the sky. The wailing, demonic wind was like countless blades of wind. They had no choice but to expend their treasure's spiritual power to create a barrier to protect themselves. "It seems like the people from before didn't go in the same direction as us," muttered Yang Jian. Yang Jian muttered as he looked at the snow-filled sky. The snow and wind here were simply too strong. Even sovereign emperors would not be able to fly through the air. He couldn't see anyone else's footprints, which was why Yang Jian came to this conclusion. "Not necessarily." Yi Zichen shook his head. "The snow is too heavy. Even if we left footprints, it wouldn't take long for the university to cover them up. If you don't believe me, look back and see if you can still see the footprint from before." Yang Jian looked back. They'd already been in the mountains for more than an hour. With their speed, although they couldn't fly, they weren't slow either. Now, they were almost halfway up the first mountain, but the footprints they left behind had already been buried by the university. If something unexpected happened and they had to go back the way they'd come, they wouldn't even know how. "This snow is a little too heavy." Even the Hermit Emperor couldn't help but sigh. If they didn't use their spiritual power to protect themselves, they'd be buried alive in less than 100 breaths of time. The only fortunate thing was that they hadn't run into any vicious beasts guarding the treasures. Of course, that also meant they hadn't run into any. "Don't you feel like we're using up our spiritual power too quickly?" Pu Jingwan suddenly turned around. Her face was flushed with a sickly red. Despite the frigid wind, her face was covered in a thin sheen of sweat. Her beautiful eyes flashed with exhaustion, and her lips parted slightly. She seemed to be having difficulty breathing. "Everyone stop!" Yi Zichen noticed Pu Jingwan's strange behavior and hurriedly called out to the others. Pu Jingwan was like a fish that had been washed ashore. She opened her mouth and struggled to breathe. When Yi Zichen walked up to her, she was so weak she couldn't even speak. Her face was twisted in agony, and she was curled up into a ball. "Senior Hidden Emperor." Before Yi Zichen even finished speaking, the Hermit Emperor arrived by Pu Jingwan's side and felt her pulse. The others formed a circle around Pu Jingwan, setting up a barrier around her. "Get out of the way, she needs some fresh air." Seeing that everyone had surrounded them, the Hermit Emperor hurriedly dispersed them. Yang Jian and the others didn't dare to tarry any longer. The Hermit Emperor furrowed his brows as he took Pu Jingwan's pulse. Suddenly, a jade-green light appeared in his hand. The light burrowed into Pu Jingwan's pulse. Then the Hermit Emperor took out a pill and stuffed it into her mouth. "How is it?" Yi Zichen asked worriedly. Furrowing his brows, the Hermit Emperor withdrew his hand. After receiving treatment, Pu Jingwan's symptoms seemed to have eased somewhat, and the pained expression on her face lessened. "It looks like altitude sickness," the Hermit Emperor said. "However, the spiritual power in her body is depleting very quickly. When I checked on her symptoms just now, her divine elixir had already dried up." "Altitude sickness? How is this possible?" They weren't ordinary people. If they climbed too high, they'd suffer from altitude sickness. Everyone here was an emperor-level expert. Normally, they walked through the sky, and the altitude wasn't much higher than the mountain range before them. None of them had ever experienced altitude sickness before. The most important part was what the Hermit Emperor said. Pu Jingwan's spiritual power was depleting very quickly. They'd only been in the mountains for less than 2 hours. Even if they'd been using their spiritual power to resist the wind and snow, they shouldn't have used up so much energy. Even Yi Zichen felt his body brimming with spiritual power. Pu Jingwan was an emperor-level expert. She probably had even more left. "Should we go back?" asked Yang Jian. Regardless of whether it was altitude sickness or not, Pu Jingwan had only become like this after reaching the mountains. Perhaps the mountains were completely different from flying, and she really did suffer from altitude sickness. Furthermore, Pu Jingwan's cultivation wasn't low. In terms of cultivation, Yi Zichen, Gu Li, and Enlu were all below her. None of them had suffered from altitude sickness, and the Hermit Emperor said it was altitude sickness. "Don't." After swallowing the pill, Pu Jingwan suddenly raised her hand and shook her head. Her face was still flushed, and her aura was weak. She forced herself to her feet, and a hint of a smile flashed through her eyes. "I'm much better now. Don't worry about me too much. I'll just follow behind you." No matter what, Pu Jingwan refused to leave. She knew that if she wanted to leave, Yi Zichen wouldn't abandon her. However, they'd already made it this far, and quite a few others had already entered the mountains before them. They were already a step behind the others, so if they brought her back up, they'd be even slower. Everyone else was too late. She couldn't let Yi Zichen miss out on his good fortune just because of her. "I'll go take care of big sister Jingwan," said Enlu. Among them, Enlu's cultivation was the lowest. She was roughly in the diviner realm. Who knew what methods Gu Li had used to bring her in as well? It was very clear who could enter the tomb. At the very least, one had to be a ruler. Enlu's cultivation was low, and she had to be protected the entire time. She felt bad for always causing trouble for others. Now that she'd finally found something she could help with, she immediately volunteered to take care of Pu Jingwan. Gu Li glanced at Enlu. He knew what she was thinking, so he didn't refuse and nodded. "These are some divine-grade spirit-recovering pills. If you feel like your spiritual energy is running low, take one." Yi Zichen was still worried about Pu Jingwan's condition, so he took out a dozen bottles of pills. Divine-grade spirit-recovering pills were priceless outside. Even on the third floor of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, there were less than 100 of them. But this wasn't the time to fuss about such things. No matter how valuable these pills were, they couldn't compare to Pu Jingwan's. "All right," Pu Jingwan smiled. Yi Zichen handed her the pills, then gently patted her on the head. "Take good care of big sister Jingwan, got it?" "I got it." Enlu nodded confidently, then carefully supported Pu Jingwan like a little adult. "Do you think the God Emperor's remnant soul lied to us? We've been walking for so long, but we haven't seen any vicious beasts. Isn't that a good thing? If we run into a vicious beast, are you going to fight it?" "I'll go." The great sage pounded his chest. It seemed the great sage, who loved to fight, couldn't hold back any longer. When Yi Zichen saw this, he shook his head helplessly and chuckled. However, he really wasn't worried about running into a vicious beast. Everyone in their group was strong enough to hold their own. If they ran into a vicious beast guarding a treasure, they wouldn't have to worry about being wiped out. "Enlu! Enlu!" At that moment, Pu Jingwan, who'd been walking at the back of the group, suddenly cried out hoarsely. Hearing this, everyone turned their heads. Before them, there was an afterimage that had already rushed over a step ahead of them. Scram! Naturally, it was Gu Li. He pushed Pu Jingwan to the ground, then looked at Enlu, who was lying in the snow. Enlu's current state was similar to Pu Jingwan's. Her face was flushed with a sickly red, like a stranded fish struggling for air. "Gu Li, what are you doing?" Yi Zichen helped Pu Jingwan to her feet, then glared at Gu Li. "What am I doing? Can't you see Enlu's condition?" Gu Li's eyes were bloodshot. To him, Enlu was his life. When he saw her like this, how could he not freak out? "Jingwan, what's wrong with Enlu?" asked Yi Zichen. "Lil, Enlu said she was tired and wanted to rest. So I said we'd rest here for a bit. I was just about to call for you, but Enlu's already like this." Did I infect her?" asked Pu Jingwan worriedly. "What else?" Gu Li's expression was ferocious, as if he wanted to eat someone alive. The Hermit Emperor retracted his hand. "It's indeed the same symptom." Pu Jingwan. A pitch-black ball of light shot towards Pu Jingwan. Yi Zichen unsheathed the Xianyuan sword and blocked it. The ball of light flew to the other side of the mountain range, flattening half of it. Guli, Guli, as Yi Zichen roared, and Lu tugged at Guli's clothes. This has nothing to do with Big Sister Jingwan. I forbid you from fighting her. And Lu, how are you feeling? Asked Guli. I'm fine. I just felt really tired, but I'm much better now, said Lu with a warm smile. Guli couldn't bear to see her like this. He picked her up and prepared to leave. Guli, what are you doing? I'm much better now. Let's go down the mountain. I don't want this transcendence anymore. Don't throw a tantrum like a child. And Lu frowned like a little adult. You're already here. How can you leave the mountain just like that? I agree. Yi Zichen nodded. He'd long since wanted to send Pu Jingwan down as well, but to his surprise, the crowd burst into derisive laughter. How pitiful. To think the third era's masters of the stars would be so soft-hearted. The crowd turned and saw that the speaker was none other than the venerable of numinous treasure, who'd said nothing on the way here. He sneered as he looked at Gu Li and Yi Zichen, who were retreating because of the women. His eyes were filled with disdain. What do you two think you're doing? Playing house. You can go up the mountain whenever you want and go down whenever you want. Don't forget what you're carrying on your shoulders. You want to go down now? What were you thinking before? Since the Transcendence Mausoleum contains the fortune of transcendence, it must be full of danger. If you want to keep the women safe, don't bring them along. Now that they're showing symptoms, you want to go down the mountain. Chapter 1644. What do you mean? Guli asked with bloodshot eyes. The venerable of numinous treasure merely glanced at him indifferently, but said nothing. Speak. Guli was about to go crazy. And Lu was his life, yet this person said that if he left the mountain, she'd die. Now, he was filled with regret. If he had known that something like this would happen, no matter how much Lu begged him, he would never have brought her to such a place. Is this how you ask for help? The venerable of Lingbao snorted. You don't have the strength of the Emperor's star, but you do have the temper of the Emperor's star. Sovereign, Guli is anxious to save someone. If you know what's going on, then just say it, said Yi Zichen worriedly. I'm not too sure, but I'm sure that they'll definitely die if they descend the mountain now. The only thing we can do now is to keep moving forward. The sovereign of numinous treasure looked at Lu and Pu Jingwan. It's best if the two of them are isolated from everyone else. No one can be sure if the symptoms really are contagious. What do you mean by that? Guli glared. You don't have to glare at me. I'm just saying what I want to say. Even the Hermit Emperor couldn't see through their symptoms. I have my suspicions, but I can't prove them. The girl in your arms only got sick after she started following Pu Jingwan. Who knows if it's a contagious disease? The venerable of numinous treasure said calmly. The two of them must be separated. And you're hugging her like that. Maybe you're also a carrier of the virus. Please stay away from us. Even if you don't say it, I can't be bothered to associate with you. Guli clenched his teeth, then carried Lu to the back of the group. Yi Zichen muttered to himself for a moment, then followed. Yi, don't come over. The venerable of Lingbao is right. No one can be sure if this is an infectious disease. What's more, we're in the middle of a mountain range filled with ferocious beasts. If we all get infected, then we'll all be wiped out if we encounter a ferocious beast. Yi Zichen glanced at Guli. It was also to let him understand the venerable of numinous treasure's intention. Those suspected of carrying the virus were quarantined at the back, while Yang Jian and a few other healthy people led the way. However, no one would have guessed that not long after they left, the great sage would show the same symptoms as Pu Jingwan and the others. It wasn't just him. Even Xianji of the Profound Pavilion was showing the same symptoms. When the symptoms broke out, several Imperial Lord experts were struck down by what appeared to be altitude sickness. The great saint's hands pressed against the ground as he coughed uncontrollably. Xianji's brows furrowed as she sat on the ground, unable to move a single step. Pu Jingwan. Just as the team came to a halt, Pu Jingwan, who was the first to show symptoms, collapsed on the mountainside. Yi Zichen probed her nose. He could still sense her weak breathing, but it was barely discernible. Even the Hermit Emperor was at a loss for what to do. He had practiced medicine for hundreds of thousands of years, but he had never encountered such a strange symptom. The Venerable of Numinous Treasure walked up to Pu Jingwan. He reached out and flipped her eyelids, then placed his fingers on her neck for a long time. Finally, he ripped off her left sleeve. A dark red, dotted line extended from her arm to her shoulder. Then he walked over to Enlu's side and ripped off her left sleeve as well. Another dark red line appeared, but her condition was much better than Pu Jingwan's. When he reached Xianji and the Great Sage's sides, the same thing happened to their arms, especially the Great Sage. The dark red line on his arm was even worse than Pu Jingwan's. "You've been holding it in all this time?" The Venerable glanced at the Great Sage. The Great Sage said nothing, but it was clear that he was in great pain. At first, he was wheezing and coughing, but now he was retching. "Venerable Numinous Treasure, what on earth is going on?" The Hermit Emperor didn't know what was going on, but judging from the Venerable's expression, he knew a thing or two. Everyone else who wasn't showing symptoms looked at him. The Venerable furrowed his brows, then looked around. "If I'm not mistaken, the problem lies on this mountain. Do I need you to tell me that?" roared Gu Li. The Venerable glanced at the furious Gu Li. He clearly didn't want to say anything more. However, he and the Great Sage were good friends. Whenever they had something to do, they'd exchange tips on how to retrieve treasures. He couldn't be bothered to care whether the others died or not. If the Great Sage died as well, he'd lose a dear friend. The Venerable completely ignored Gu Li and looked directly at Yizichen. Their symptoms seem like they've ingested the pollen of 1,000 lotus. 1,000 lotus? The Hermit Emperor arched his brows. It seemed he knew about the flower. "That flower is a medicinal ingredient. Quite a few pills contain it, but I've never heard of it being a poison. 1,000 lotus is a pill refinement ingredient. But how much pollen do you put into a pill?" Although the Hermit Emperor wasn't a pill refinement grandmaster, he practiced medicine for many years and had some understanding of pills. The Venerable's words instantly brought him to his senses. "You're saying there's a field of 1,000 lotus flowers nearby?" The Venerable nodded non-committally. 1,000 lotus flowers live in snowy mountains, and this is a snowy mountain. It's the perfect place for them to grow. Furthermore, this is the Transcendence Mausoleum. It only appears once in 1,000,000,000,000 years. Without outside interference, 100 million years of growth will make the 1,000 lotus flowers grow to what? How long will they grow? That. When he heard this, the Hermit Emperor couldn't help but think of a field of 1,000 lotus flowers. The 1,000 lotus flower was a rare and precious medicinal herb, and its effect was to purify the color and medicinal efficacy of pills. Even divine-grade pills could be purified by adding a bit of 1,000 lotus powder. As a result, 1,000 lotus flowers were priceless outside. They were priceless, but there was no supply. Countless pill refiners dreamed of obtaining them. In the upper 3 realms, anyone who could find a single 1,000 lotus flower wouldn't only be able to leap through the Dragon's Gate, but after selling it, they'd be able to go from supreme level to divine level. From this, it could be seen how valuable the 1,000 lotus flower was. However, the Hermit Emperor had no idea that too much of their pollen was a kind of poison. This wasn't because he was ignorant or ill-informed. Rather, there was simply no place in the Yao and Demon realms where 1,000 lotus flowers could grow for millions of years without being destroyed. Anyone who saw 1,000 lotus flower, even if it wasn't fully grown yet, would want to dig up everything within 10 miles of it. "You still haven't told me how you're going to save them," said Gu Li. He didn't care whether the 1,000 lotus flower was 1,000 lotus or not, nor did he care how expensive it was. At this moment, all he could see was the poison in Lu and the method to detoxify her. Around the 1,000 lotus flower, there will be a type of grass known as the sorrow-relieving grass. This kind of grass was extremely poisonous, and eating it could make one forget their worries. Of course, the result was naturally death. You should know about the Hermit Emperor, right? This type of grass is usually harvested to make poison, said the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. The Hermit Emperor nodded, and the Venerable of Numinous Treasure added, "The herb that can cure the poison of the 1,000 lotus flower powder is this sorrow relief grass. If it can survive under the 1,000 lotus flower powder, this sorrow relief grass will definitely have resistance to the 1,000 lotus flower powder. If you find it and give it to these people, they might still have a chance to live. As for the location of the 1,000 lotus, judging from the current situation, there should be 1,000 lotuses area nearby. You just have to search carefully. I'll go right now, said Gu Li without even thinking about it. If you go by yourself, you'll just be courting death. The 1,000 lotus flower is a supreme treasure in the divine, Yao, and devil realms. Any one of the 1,000 lotus flowers would be surrounded by fierce beasts, let alone a field of 1,000 lotus flowers. If there wasn't a group of ferocious beasts guarding that place, then the ferocious beasts that were able to take control of the 1,000 lotus flowers by themselves had to be at a fairly high realm. So high. The Lord of Numinous Treasure glanced at Gu Li, then at Yang Jian and Yi Zichen. The two of you come with us. The Hermit Emperor and I will stay here to take care of the patients. Pu Jingwan and the monkey's situation is critical, and we don't have much time left for them. If that crimson thread reached their hearts would explode. It will become the place where the 1,000 lotuses will sprout. Take root and sprout? The expressions of Yi Zichen and the others froze. If their hearts became the seeds of 1,000 lotuses, not even a golden immortal of the great firmament would be able to save them. He had to find the forget worries grass quickly. Let's head out right away. Before you go, leave me some spirit recovering pills. They'll use up their spiritual energy quickly. In this kind of frigid weather, if they don't have spiritual energy to protect them, they'll freeze to death before the 1,000 lotus flowers take root in their hearts, said the Lord of Numinous Treasure. It was still snowing heavily. Yi Zichen left practically all of his divine-grade spirit-recovering pills with the Lord of Numinous Treasure. He only kept a few bottles for himself in case he needed them. Yang Jian, Gu Li, and Yi Zichen left the encampment and began to search aimlessly for the 1,000 lotus. Based on the Lord of Numinous Treasure's description, there should be a large field of 1,000 lotus flowers nearby. However, finding them was still difficult. They were on a snowy mountain, and the 1,000 lotus flowers were snow white. The snow seemed to act as their camouflage, making them difficult to detect. We left in too much of a hurry. We should have asked how to find them, said Yang Jian. The 1,000 lotus flowers have a strange fragrance. If they're in a large field, the fragrance should be very strong. All we have to do is follow the scent, said Gu Li. Are you an idiot? Yang Jian rolled his eyes in exasperation. Just listen to the wind. Even if there's a strange fragrance, do you think we'll be able to follow it? Then tell me how to find them, said Gu Li. For once, he didn't retort. Yang Jian pursed his lips. I'm usually not the one to do things that require brains. Sure. Chapter 1645. The footprints were very new. When Yi Zichen and company saw them, they were only covered in a thin layer of snow. Judging from the extent of the snowfall on the snow mountain, this huge footprint hadn't been here for too long. Yi, you mean? Yang Jian looked at the footprints in front of him and gulped. The footprints in front of him were too big. The footprints were more than 10 meters long and 3 meters wide. Are you trying to say that we can find the 1,000 lotus flowers by following these footprints? Is there a problem? Yi Zichen carefully concealed his aura, then gestured for Gu Li and Yang Jian to do the same. Didn't the Venerable of Numinous Treasure say that there are definitely vicious beasts guarding the 1,000 lotuses? Looking at these footprints, it should be the guardian beast. Judging from the footprints, it should be the footprints of a walking beast. But thinking about the size of this beast, it shouldn't be small. Looking down at his own feet and the footprints in front of him, he could roughly guess how big the beast was after magnifying it to the same scale. After determining the direction of the footprints, Yi Zichen and company slowly made their way through the snow. Yang Jian's scalp went numb when he saw the footprints. But when he saw Yi Zichen, Gu Li, and Yi Zichen walk over, Yang Jian's cultivation was the highest among them, and he didn't want to see the monkey die. He had no choice but to grimace and follow them. 100 meters. Yi Zichen and company only saw the beast's second footprint after walking for about 100 meters. Smell. Gu Li suddenly stopped, stretched out his neck, and sniffed. Yang Jian and Yi Zichen naturally smelled it as well. There was a faint fragrance mixed in with the demonic wind. The smell was very special. It smelled like roses, but it was even stronger. This kind of thickness made the fragrance even more pleasant. Yang Jian straightened his neck and kept inhaling. Yi Zichen sniffed the air for a while. It smells a little like the fragrance of elixirs. What kind of pill could be so fragrant? Could it be that we've come across some precious treasure? Hearing that, Gu Li said, "We did indeed encounter a great treasure. 1,000 lotuses. Do they count as a great treasure? 1,000 lotus flowers?" Yang Jian was stunned for a moment, and his face instantly tensed up as he sniffed the fragrance. "This is the smell of 1,000 lotus? What do you think?" Gu Li snorted. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Yang Jian glared viciously at Gu Li, then waved his hand and set up a barrier around them. Then he sat cross-legged on the ground and muttered to himself, "I'm going to die, I'm going to die." He remembered how Pu Jingwan and the others were faring. Even a monkey looked weak. The reason they were in this state was because of the 1,000 lotus powder. What was he doing just now? He was actually facing the wind to smell the fragrance of the pollen. The spiritual power in his body lingered around his body, and steam rose from the top of his head. "What are you doing?" Yi Zichen didn't quite understand Yang Jian's actions. "Don't mess around. If that ferocious beast finds us and we don't find the sorrow relief grass, then we're done for. If I didn't do this, I would be finished." Yang Jian shouted. "Then what are you?" "I'm expelling the poison." White steam rose from the top of Yang Jian's head. Every pore on his body opened in an attempt to expel the poison from his body. Yang Jian was truly anxious. He was in the prime of his life. If his kidneys became weak, he'd be better off dead. "Don't waste your energy. The 1,000 lotus powder is a gas. So long as you breathe it in, it'll flow through your limbs and meridians. If you want to expel it completely, you'll need to reconstruct a new body and break all your meridians." He glanced at Yang Jian. Gu Li snorted. "What the hell?" When he heard Gu Li's words, Yang Jian, still sitting cross-legged, nearly suffered a cultivation deviation. With great difficulty, he calmed himself, then lay on the ground and looked up at the sky as if there was nothing left to live for. Ice and snow filled the sky. He didn't have any barriers around him, so he allowed the snow to fall on his face. It was cold, but no matter how cold the snow was, it couldn't compare to his heart. It was over. His life had come to an end. Before long, he'd be like a monkey with a weak kidneys, and he'd have to say goodbye to his happy sexual life. Yi Zichen could immediately tell what Yang Jian was worried about. He resisted the urge to laugh, then looked over with a serious expression. "I'll take good care of sister-in-law for you. F***CK off." Yang Jian jumped up from the snow. "Yi, I treat you as a bro. You actually have ideas about your sister-in-law? If you don't want me to have ideas about sister-in-law, then just be good," said Yi Zichen. Suddenly, Yang Jian drooped his head like a frosted eggplant. He looked down at the space between his legs. "There's no hope." This time, Yi Zichen couldn't help but laugh. Hearing Yi Zichen's laughter, Yang Jian felt a bit annoyed. "Are you a brother or not? Well, don't be so self-pitying. Since the Venerable of Numinous Treasure told us to go to the 1,000 lotuses to find sorrow relief grass, wouldn't the pollen there be much denser than in the wind? It's obvious that we're immune to the flowers. Otherwise, we would have fallen for it on the way here." Yi Zichen was speechless. Yang Jian blinked, then exclaimed in delight, "You're saying, don't worry about your lower body. Besides, even if you really did fall for it, it's not like your kidneys are weak. Gu Li and I have already been here with you for too long. Hurry up and stop fooling around. We have more important matters to attend to." The demonic wind carried the fragrance of the flowers, which meant that they were indeed very close to the 1,000 lotuses. As they followed the beast's footprints, Yi Zichen and company could more or less determine that this was the only beast guarding the 1,000 lotuses. Of course, they weren't completely sure because they hadn't actually seen the flowers yet. The smell is getting stronger and stronger. Gu Li walked in front. His eyes flashed with joy as he sensed the intensity of the fragrance. He was in a rush, and Lu was still waiting for him to pick the sorrow relief grass to savor. Yang Jian and Yi Zichen nodded, then tensed up. They continued forward for about 1,000 meters. The beast's footprints had disappeared. They'd been following the beast's footprints the entire time. As for why they were so certain that the beast would lead them to the 1,000 lotuses, it was merely a guess. Following the beast's footprints was better than running around aimlessly. What's more, as they followed the beast's footprints, they could sense that the fragrance of the flowers was getting stronger and stronger. The 1,000 lotuses are definitely around here. Ghoulie squinted his eyes and sniffed. Ghoulie wrinkled his nose and narrowed his eyes. The fragrance of the flowers was so thick that it stung their nostrils. However, the snowy mountain winds were too strong, so they couldn't tell which direction the fragrance was coming from. Yizichin glanced around. In a situation like this, using his divine sense was the best option. However, releasing their divine sense was very likely to alarm the vicious beast that had left behind the footprints. Their purpose for coming here was to retrieve the sorrow-relieving grass as soon as possible. If they could retrieve the sorrow-relieving grass without fighting, it would naturally be the most time-saving method. Oh well, Yang, open your eye of the heavens. It was very difficult to locate the 1,000 lotuses with the naked eye in this windy weather. The great sage wasn't there, and Yizichin hadn't fully mastered his fiery eyes of truth, so the task of locating the 1,000 lotuses could only be left to Yang Jian, who had the eye of the heavens. Opening his third eye, Yang Jian could not help but look around. Look! Yang Jian pointed down into the valley. There was a plain at the foot of the mountain range. The plain was completely covered in ice and snow. When you looked over, all you could see was ice and snow. You couldn't see anything special at all. However, if you looked closely, you'd see that the plain was covered in endless, crystal-like lotuses. Are those 1,000 lotuses? This was Yizichin's first time seeing them, so he wasn't too sure. However, the fragrance coming from the bottom of the valley was the same one they'd smelled along the way. While Yizichin hesitated, Ghoulie was already about to jump into the valley, but before he could do so, Yizichin pulled him back. Are you crazy? The beast's footprints stopped here. It's obvious that the big guy is at the bottom of the valley. If you jump down like that, do you think your tiny body will even be enough to fill its teeth? Ghoulie's head tightened. He'd nearly forgotten about the beast guarding this place. He'd always been cautious, but this time, Enlu's life was on the line, so it was hard for him to remain absolutely calm. They'd followed the beast's footprints and the fragrance of the 1,000 lotuses. The beast's footprints had disappeared here, so it was likely that the beast was in the valley. As for why the beast had appeared 10,000 meters away from the 1,000 lotuses, it was very likely that this mountain range was its territory. It had just been patrolling its territory to see if there were any intruders. However, these kinds of beasts were usually very territorial. They shouldn't have been able to sense Yizichin and company following them for so long. Yizichin, what do you think we should do? Ghoulie's mind was in chaos. When he saw the 1,000 lotuses in front of him, his only thought was to find the sorrow relief grass and bring it to Enlu as soon as possible. He couldn't calmly make a decision, so he could only rely on Yizichin to plan. You're asking me now? I don't know what to do either. Yizichin shrugged. Plans can never keep up with changes. What's more, we've only seen the beast's footprints. As for anything else, we haven't even seen its back. Chapter 1646. The valley was halfway up the mountain range. From a bird's-eye view, it looked more like a basin in the middle of the mountain range. Just as they were about to enter the valley, they sensed a wave of power envelop them. I know a few spatial arts. If we go down, we'll be less likely to be discovered, said Ghoulie as he looked into the valley. Why didn't you use it earlier? Yang Jian tried to pick a fight, but he'd forgotten that they'd never needed to use spatial arts before. Being able to use spatial arts was naturally a good thing. Enveloped by Ghoulie's power of space, Yizichin and the others passed through the mountain range's parallel space and slowly approached the valley. The valley was roughly 1,000 meters deep. After a few dozen breaths of time, they reached its bottom. Everything was much easier than they'd imagined. Perhaps it was because of their spatial arts, but they didn't disturb the vicious beast as they descended. I've only scratched the surface of the Tao of space. Even if we didn't actually encounter the beast, there's no way we could have reached the bottom so easily without being detected, said Guli. He couldn't help but remind them that things were going too smoothly. Not being detected isn't a good thing. Hurry up and get the sorrow relief grass. Then hurry back, said Yang Jian. Yang Jian's words struck a chord with Gu Li's heart. He'd been thinking the same thing ever since he'd set out in search of the sorrow relief grass. Now that Yang Jian urged them on, Gu Li's barely reinvigorated vigilance was completely shattered. He ignored his strange success and headed straight for the 1,000 lotuses. They approached, an entire valley of 1,000 lotuses. The 1,000 lotuses had 6 petals and were roughly 30 centimeters tall. Both the petals and leaves were pure crystalline, and the roots were the same. As a result, it was difficult to detect them in this snowy plain. In the past, even a single one of these precious medicinal herbs was a blessing from the heavens. Yet here, there was an entire field of them. From the looks of it, there were at least 10,000 lotuses growing here. In truth, that was only the most obvious part of their value. The true value of the 1,000 lotuses lay in their seeds. The reason why the bounty hunters who found the 1,000 lotus would dig up the soil around it was because the seeds of the 1,000 lotus were at its roots. If the seed was planted and cultivated artificially, it could grow into a new 1,000 lotus. Even the peak powers of the god, Yao, and demon realms had planted a few 1,000 lotuses. However, the number of 1,000 lotuses they planted couldn't compare to the number here. If bounty hunters were to see such a large number of 1,000 lotus flowers, they would definitely go crazy. Forget about the bounty hunters. If Pu Jingwan saw them, that scene could be imagined. The dire beasts living here sure have a strong taste, Yang Jian said while pinching his nose. The fragrance of the flowers was very pungent. When Yi Zichen and company approached, they couldn't help but frown at the pungent smell. The smell of a single 1,000 lotus was actually very pleasant, but when so many of them were gathered together, it felt like they were sprayed with perfume. Wearing the right amount of perfume was very tempting, but wearing too much would make people feel disgusted. Don't talk so much. Hurry up and take the sorrow relief grass and leave. Yi Zichen didn't want to stay here for too long. The fact that he hadn't encountered any ferocious beasts already made his heart race. However, since he was already here, there was no point in hesitating. He would just take the sorrow-relieving grass and leave. The venerable of numinous treasure hadn't lied to them. There really were some weed-like plants growing around the 1,000 lotus flowers. This type of plant was also crystalline in color, and it was very difficult to find them in this kind of snowy ground. They only had a single leaf and were no more than 10 centimeters tall. They grew practically under the protection of the 1,000 lotus flowers. They were worried that damaging the 1,000 lotus flowers would attract the attention of that ferocious beast. As a result, they were extremely careful when picking the sorrow-relieving grass. Furthermore, they had to be on guard against the ferocious beasts in the valley. After a full hour, they'd only managed to pick a dozen or so stalks. Ouch! At that moment, a strange cry echoed through the valley. Yi Zichen and the others froze in the middle of picking sorrow-relieving grass. That cry didn't sound like a single ferocious beast, but rather a group of them. Yi Zichen and company quietly looked behind them and noticed that several tens of 3-meter-tall snow apes had appeared in the valley. The snow apes were ice blue, but their bellies were covered in long white fur. As if they had seen an intruder, the dozens of snow apes patted their chests with their burly arms, and their ice-blue eyes flashed with anger at the intruder, especially when they saw the sorrow-relieving grass in Yi Zichen's hands. Ouch! Fury was written all over their faces. Yi Zichen and the others stood back to back and looked at the snow apes. F***CK, they weren't guarding the 1,000 lotus flowers, they were guarding the sorrow-relieving grass. We're finished. We were caught stealing their treasure. Look at their arms. They'll rip us apart. I won't do this kind of stealing in the future. Let the monkey do it. Yang Jian shouted. Cut the crap. We should have enough sorrow-relieving grass for them to use. Let's kill our way out before that big guy gets here. Yi Zichen tossed the sorrow-relieving grass into the Yao ceiling pagoda. Then his eyes blazed. Raging Sea of Fire. The 5 Elements Dao art was a fire-type Dao art. The raging flame suddenly burned in the snowfield. The scorching white flame melted the snow in the snowfield into fine streams that flowed into the cracks between the rocks. Just as he'd expected, the snow apes lived in the snowy mountains all year round. Fire was their natural enemy. When they saw the raging inferno, the snow apes visibly panicked. However, when they saw the surrounding snow melt, they were instantly enraged. They were even angrier than when Yi Zichen and Yi Zichen had stolen the sorrow-relieving grass. Ouch! The snow apes patted their chests and ran through the flames. They were extremely fast. Every step they took left a deep footprint in the ground. Their fists were their most lethal weapons. Yi Zichen watched the snow apes run past him. Then a pair of wind wings appeared on his back. He retreated several meters and dodged the snow ape's fists. Rip! To his surprise, the snow ape's fists clearly hadn't hit him at all, but a deep wound appeared on his face. Be careful. These snow apes are a bit strange. Even if they can't hit you, they'll still get hurt. However, when Yi Zichen looked over at Gu Li and Yang Jian, he realized that his warning was unnecessary. Both of them were fighting with the snow ape with weapons in their hands. You punched me, and I stabbed you with my sword. As for the class allocation among the three, it was basically 2 warriors and 1 sorcerer. Although Yi Zichen's cultivation level was rather low, it wasn't the time for him to slack off. Yang Jian and Gu Li purposely prevented the snow apes from getting close to Yi Zichen, while Yi Zichen, who was protected at the back, took on the role of magic output. Flame explosion, wind shadow, roar of the rain, unstoppable thunder. Yi Zichen, who was standing at the back, was like a magic cannon as he bombarded the snow apes with his wind, rain, lightning, and fire elements. Not only did the snow apes feel crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, Yi Zichen could faintly smell the smell of barbecued meat. However, as they fought, more and more snow apes crawled out of the valley. Even now, Yi Zichen and company did not know where their lair was. All they knew was that after one batch died, another batch would appear out of nowhere. We can't keep wasting time like this. Gu Li frowned after fighting for over 2 hours. After fighting for more than 2 hours, Gu Li frowned. With Yi Zichen continuously casting spells from the back, while he and Yang Jian fought at the front, the normal snow apes were unable to do anything to them for a while. However, they couldn't do anything to the snow apes either. This was their main base of operations, and there were simply too many of them. After killing one batch, another batch would appear. Never mind how much spiritual energy they'd expended, they didn't have enough time to waste on them. And Lu, Pu Jingwan, the great sage, and Xianji were still waiting for them to return with the sorrow relief grass. Furthermore, the big guy they'd followed hadn't even come out yet. Dealing with these little guys had cost them so much spiritual energy. If the big guy suddenly appeared, what would they do? Also, don't you feel like they're getting fiercer and fiercer? Yang Jian swung his arms. Previously, he could chop off a snow ape's head with a single swing of his lance. Now, the snow apes could hold out against him for a few rounds. Just now, one of the snow apes had punched him so hard his palm hurt. Perhaps they're elites now? Yi Zichen furrowed his brows. They could sense that the snow apes were much more resistant to his Tao of the 5 elements. Some of them were even able to stand within his flames and fight alongside them. It doesn't seem like it. Gu Li stared at the distant snow apes. They were currently in a truce, and the snow apes sensed that these invaders were difficult to deal with. They didn't want to see their comrades die at Yi Zichen's hands. Yi Zichen and the others needed time to consume pills and recover their spiritual energy. Both sides were at peace. Yi Zichen took advantage of this time to distribute the divine-grade spirit recovery pills. Fortunately, he'd had the foresight to conserve some. Otherwise, running out of spiritual energy would have been difficult to deal with. Hey, look at those wild monkeys. Yang Jian suddenly pointed at the snow apes. What are they doing with their nostrils? Hearing that, Yi Zichen and Gu Li noticed that as they consumed pills to recover their spiritual energy, the snow apes' nostrils flared, and their auras gradually grew stronger as time went on. Their auras rose so slowly that they hadn't even noticed. But now, it seemed that the snow apes' auras had increased by at least 10%. Chapter 1647. The snow ape's cultivation levels were actually increasing. If Yi Zichen and Gu Li weren't mistaken, the 1,000 lotus flowers and the worry-relieving grass were nourishment for their cultivation. No wonder the snow apes grew stronger and stronger. It was all thanks to the 1,000 lotus flowers and the worry-relieving grass. In such a short amount of time, Yi Zichen and the others were unable to make a direct judgment. Just which of the two items had allowed the snow apes to improve so much. However, they knew very well that destroying this place would prevent their cultivation from rising at its source. Destroy it. Yang Jian was a bit lost in thought, but the snow apes sensed Gu Li and Yi Zichen's intentions. The stalemate they'd worked so hard to maintain was instantly broken. Dozens of snow apes swung their powerful arms, then charged savagely towards Yi Zichen and the others like small mountains. Again, Yang Jian didn't quite understand why Yi Zichen and Gu Li had destroyed the 1,000 lotus flowers behind them. However, he clearly knew that the snow apes were their enemies. Since they dared to run in their direction, Yang Jian wouldn't hold back at all. He raised his lance and turned into a blur as he fought the snow apes. It seems like I was right. The snow apes' impatience and anger confirmed Yi Zichen and Gu Li's suspicions. The reason they cared so much about this place was because there was nourishment for their cultivation. Heavenly flames ablaze. Pure, white heavenly flames descended from the sky. Countless fireballs, each 1/2 meter in diameter, fell from the sky. The fireballs didn't pose any threat to the snow apes at all. Instead, they all landed where the 1,000 lotus flowers and worry-relieving grass were. Heavenly flames were of a higher grade than samadhi true fire. Even though they were on a snowy plain, the heavenly flames that landed on the ground continued to burn. Coupled with the demonic winds of the mountain range, the fireballs instantly turned into a raging inferno. In the blink of an eye, the area where the 1,000 lotus flowers and worry-relieving grass grew turned into a sea of flames. Seeing this, the surrounding snow apes roared even louder, their icy blue eyes bloodshot with rage. After that, the snow apes gave up on fighting Yang Jian and Gu Li and completely ignored the heat. The raging inferno rushed into the sea of flames, as if trying to put out the heavenly flames. The blazing flames scorched the back of the snow apes, who were in the middle of the sea of fire. But they still didn't care and tried their best to put out the fire. That wasn't all. More and more snow apes gathered. Yi Zichen and the others saw quite a few of the injured snow apes they'd fought earlier charge into the heavenly flames with no regard for their lives. He went in. At that moment, Yi Zichen and company let out long sighs of relief. The three intruders were no longer in the eyes of the snow apes. The only thing they wanted was to put out the fire. However, the fire that landed here was no ordinary fire. No matter how much snow those beasts sent over, it would not be able to withstand it. As long as the demonic wind didn't stop, there was no possibility of the meeting stopping. Beneath the sea of flames, the 1,000 lotuses and worry-relieving grass gradually melted. For some reason, when he saw this, Yi Zichen was suddenly reminded of Pu Jingwan. If she saw so many 1,000 lotuses and worry-relieving grass burning, given her greedy nature, she might break down. Let's go while they don't have time to care about us. The fire had solved the problem they were facing at its source. The appearance of the fire caused the snow apes to join the fire extinguishing team, but the three intruders didn't pay any attention to the snow apes. Yi Zichen and Yang Jian nodded, then glanced behind them. Gu Li used his Tao of space to discreetly teleport them out of here. To tell the truth, even though they'd been ambushed by the snow apes, they still felt as if everything had gone too smoothly. From start to finish, they'd never seen the snow apes' footprints. I wonder how the monkey and the others are doing. Do either of you know the way back? Yang Jian glanced at the snow-capped mountains. When they'd first arrived, they'd followed the snow apes' footprints, but after so much time had passed, they'd long since been covered up by the snow. Yang Jian hadn't memorized the way, but the way he saw it, Yi Zichen and Gu Li definitely had. I know. Gu Li rolled his eyes. He'd known they weren't reliable, which was why he'd memorized the way. The 1,000 lotuses didn't leave without incident. When they looked back, they could still see the blazing flames. Hey, suddenly, they heard a roar several times louder than the snow apes in the distance. Through the sound waves, they could tell that the angry shout was still very far away from their position. Even so, the deafening roar hurt Yi Zichen and Gu Li's eardrums. If they'd been any closer, their eardrums might have bled. "It's definitely that big guy," said Yi Zichen. "Don't tell me that big guy found out we burned their house and chased us out of anger." Yang Jian gulped. When he'd first seen the footprints, he'd already sensed that the snow ape wasn't someone to be trifled with. That roar just now only made him feel that it was best to avoid provoking it if possible. Good job. Little did they know, Gu Li, who'd been leading the way this entire time, suddenly stopped. "What are you doing? Hurry up and run. If that guy catches up to us, the three of us won't even be enough to appease its appetite," shouted Yang Jian. "We can't run," said Gu Li indifferently. "Why can't we run? It can't be. You didn't forget the way, did you?" Yang Jian was speechless. If he'd known Gu Li was so unreliable, he should have memorized the way, but he'd forgotten. He'd always disliked Gu Li, but when it came to memorizing the way, he'd bet everything on him. On Gu Li. Yang Jian stomped his feet anxiously. Yes, he'd been the Heavenly Court's war god, but in truth, the Heavenly Court had given him that title. He didn't like danger. His biggest dream was to pick up girls. Otherwise, he wouldn't have shown off his muscles to the fairies in the Heavenly Court. That big guy wasn't a fairy. If he had a choice, Yang Jian would have never fought it. "Yi, do you know the way?" Yang Jian looked at Yi Zichen. "I've memorized a bit of the way, but if I'm not mistaken, we really can't leave right now." "What do you mean?" Yang Jian didn't understand. "The big guy you're talking about is on our way back. If nothing unexpected happens, we should run into it if we keep going," said Gu Li solemnly. A hint of seriousness flashed through Gu Li's eyes. This type of savage beast is very territorial. If we rashly invade its territory and it discovers us. Gu Li didn't continue, but his meaning was clear. If they went back, they'd definitely run into that ferocious beast. Never mind whether it knew they'd stolen the sorrow relief grass it was guarding, or whether it had set fire to its primates. The mere fact that they'd invaded its territory was enough to infuriate it enough to squash Yi Zichen and the others to death. Not to mention, if it knew they'd destroyed the 1,000 lotuses and sorrow relief grass. "But we can't just stay here," said Yang Jian, glaring. "If they stayed here, the big guy would discover them sooner or later. Besides, the monkey and the others were still waiting for the sorrow relief grass to save them. The monkey's condition was the worst before they'd arrived, so they shouldn't have much time. Every second they wasted here put the great sage in even more danger. We really can't stay here any longer." Yi Zichen pursed his lips, then took out the sorrow relief grass and split it into 3 portions. "There are 3 portions here. I reckon that one of the poisons should be enough to cure them. Each of these 3 portions should be enough to cure them. Let's each take one. When we reach the berserk beasts, whoever can escape will run." "Then don't count me in." Yang Jian pushed his portion back. "I don't know the way. Even if you give it to me, I won't be able to find the monkey and the others if I run away." "I nearly forgot." Yi Zichen facepalmed speechlessly. Yang Jian also smiled awkwardly. He really hadn't thought about it that much. If he'd known this would happen, he would have memorized the way no matter what. "Then let's do it this way. We'll each take half." Yi Zichen and Gu Li took Yang Jian's sorrow relief grass, then put the sorrow relief grass into their pockets. "No matter who runs away, run as fast as you can. Don't think about fighting that big guy. Even if we can win, we'll waste too much time. All right, just call the sovereign of numinous treasure and the others over, and everything will be resolved." "Oh!" The angry roar became clearer and clearer. As Yi Zichen and company followed the path back, the deafening roar became clearer and clearer. The snow in the surrounding mountains showed signs of falling off. Along the way, Yi Zichen not only had to pay attention to the beast's location, he also had to consider whether or not they would encounter an avalanche. An avalanche on a snowy mountain like this, which was covered in snow all year round, would be truly exciting. The footprints are very new. Yang Jian didn't close his eye of the heavens. Since the snowstorm was too strong, it was very difficult for the naked eye to see far away. Thus, they could only rely on Yang Jian to scout ahead so that they could prepare in advance. The group followed the direction Yang Jian pointed and hurried over to the footprints. The footprints were indeed very new. It was as if a beast had just stepped on them, leaving behind a thin layer of snow. The big guys around here. Be careful. Don't forget what we said earlier. Whoever can run away, run away. Don't hesitate. Even if someone is trapped here by the beast, we'll naturally deal with them once Great Sage Xianji and the others are healed, Yi Zichen reminded them. Yi Zichen concealed his aura and slowly moved forward, screech. Just as they were feeling their way forward, another ear-piercing cry suddenly appeared in their ears. This cry was clearly from a different creature than the first roar. Chapter 1648. On the snowy mountain range, 3 holes squirmed in the snow like moles. Are you sure this will work? Asked Guli. By now, he was completely hidden in the snow. It snowed all year round, so the snow was thick enough to easily cover him up. Yi Zichen and Yang Jian did the same. They hid in the snow and slowly crept forward. As for the idea of crawling through the snow, it was Yang Jian who'd suggested it. Of all the imperial emperors of the 3 races, he was the only one who'd come up with such a shameless idea. Even if the other emperors admired his reputation, they wouldn't do such a thing. Are you sure? Aren't you crawling too? Yang Jian glanced at Guli. As he crawled forward, there was a layer of snow on top of his head. So long as he buried his head, it was almost impossible to tell he was hiding. I can just about see it. After crawling forward for a while, Yang Jian stopped beside a large boulder. Guli tried to get up from the snow. For him, this sort of behavior was rather embarrassing. Who told you to come out? Before Guli could move, a large hand pressed down on his head, pushing him back down into the snow. We're right next to those big guys. If you want to become their food, you'll have to go out and run a few laps. In front of the boulder, in front of Yi Zichen and the others, 2 ferocious beasts clashed violently. One was a ferocious beast whose footprints they'd seen at the very beginning. Just as they'd guessed, it was a terrestrial beast, the ancestor of the snow apes. Yi Zichen and the others couldn't even see the beast's face as they lay in the snow. All they could see was that it was much larger than they'd imagined. It was at least several hundred meters tall when it stood. Yi Zichen and the others were nothing but ants in front of it. The other was a flying beast. Its wingspan was several hundred meters long. Its feathers were pure white, without the slightest blemish. Every now and then, it let out a resonant cry. It's pretty much as we thought. These 2 beasts are fighting. Yi Zichen used his fiery eyes of truth to observe the battle. It was hard to tell which of the 2 beasts had the upper hand in such a short amount of time. However, the flying beast had wings, so it had a slight advantage over the snow apes. The 2 beasts were fighting the most primitive of beasts. The snow ape swung its fists at the bird's wings, while the bird either grabbed with its claws or grabbed with its beak. It was obvious that the 2 beasts had been fighting for a while. The bird's wings were stained with blood, while the beast's icy blue fur was dyed red. No wonder we didn't get chased out of the snow ape's territory. It turns out there's a vicious beast that cares about even more than us. Who knows? The footprints we left earlier might have been to find a flying beast. He returned to his lair because he was worried the bird would attack his lair, said Yi Zichen. That's possible. Guli nodded. However, there was a very serious problem currently plaguing them, and that was, how could he escape from under the noses of these 2 beasts? The 2 beasts were fighting right on the path Yi Zichen and the others were on their way back. If Yang Jian crawled through the snow like this, there was no way he could pass between them. Even if the 2 of them didn't notice, the snow ape's huge foot would have trampled them to death. Hey, the snow ape seemed to want to end the battle as quickly as possible. Its icy blue fur suddenly glowed with a blue light. The bird also let out a loud and clear cry, and the turbulent airwaves turned into tornadoes under the flapping of its wings. Don't tell me that bird created this demonic wind. Yang Jian couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. However, the 3 of them were still lying in the snow. From the looks of things, Wasn't this supposed to be the deciding battle between the two beasts? They were just waiting for the two beasts to decide the victor. It would be best if both of them were heavily injured, or if one was dead and the other injured. When the time came, the three of them could go out and clean up the mess, then return happily. But why were the two beasts heading in their direction? Screech. The flying beast was clearly much faster than the snow ape. It soared through the sky and swooped down. Shockingly, it was heading straight for Yi Zichen and the others. F***CK. We've been discovered, roared Yang Jian. Then what are you waiting for? Let's run. This was the path they had to take. If the beasts didn't leave, they'd have to figure out a way to break through. Since they'd been discovered, there was no point in hiding. They could just charge right through. You two run. I'll stop them. Yang Jian didn't have any sorrow relief grass, so they couldn't just charge through. They'd have to go back and deliver the antidote. So long as Yi Zichen and Guli left, they could notify the Venerable of numinous treasure and the others, and all problems would be solved. Before he could finish his sentence, Yang Jian had already rushed out to meet the flying beast. Let's go. There was no point in hesitating. They'd already discussed this beforehand. Yang Jian was an important part of their fighting force. All they had to do was take advantage of the chaos to escape. Come play with your grandpa Yang Jian for a bit. Don't be fooled by Yang Jian's antics. He was an imperial emperor. His divine power formed a net and dragged the flying beast towards him. Screech. To his surprise, Yang Jian's provocation didn't provoke the bird at all. With just a few swipes, the bird tore apart his divine power net, then chased after Gu Li and Yi Zichen without so much as a backward glance. F***CK. What's the meaning of this? Are you ignoring me? Yang Jian was furious. He released all of his divine power. The Erlang lance in his hand glowed with a lustrous white light that illuminated the entire mountain range. The snow ape had already sensed the threat of this seemingly insignificant human and was already on guard against Yang Jian's attack. However, the bird continued to chase after Gu Li and Yi Zichen without a care in the world. Is it looking for a pushover? Although they couldn't fly, Gu Li and Yi Zichen were still as nimble as ever. No matter how fast they were, they couldn't outrun a winged bird. Oh well, Yang, what's going on? Yi Zichen yelled angrily as he watched the bird approach. Yang Jian was speechless. He lost track of how many times he'd slashed at the bird, but it ignored him completely. What would he do? The snow ape didn't chase after them anymore, but the birds and beasts were still chasing after them. Wait, the snow ape was gone? Suddenly, the snow ape roared angrily from a distant valley. This roar was even more furious than before. The ape's howl caused the snow on the snowy mountain to loosen. The entire mountain range trembled violently, and the tremors grew more and more obvious. As expected, the snow ape had just returned to its lair and witnessed the prairie fire. Hey, Yi, that monkey should have noticed what we did, transmitted Yang Jian to Yi Zichen. Ignore that monkey. Even if it runs into the Venerable of numinous treasure, it'll still die. Hurry up and take care of the bird. It'll catch up to us soon. Just as Yi Zichen transmitted, he felt a chill run down his spine. He looked behind him and saw that the bird had already arrived above him and Gu Li. The bird's wings were so large that they couldn't see the sky at all. Its enormous shadow loomed over them as its claws swiped towards them. 3,000 bolts of lightning. The power of lightning surged, causing the bird to cry out in pain. However, the lightning only paralyzed it for a few seconds before it flapped its wings again and chased after them. Yi, the bird is ignoring me. You should have something it's interested in. Interested? All of a sudden, Yi Zichen remembered the sorrow relief grass in his pocket. As he ran, he took it out. When the bird saw it, it flapped its wings even faster. It wanted the sorrow relief grass. Yi Zichen instantly understood, then ran in the opposite direction with the sorrow relief grass in hand. Gu Li, go back and tell the Venerable of numinous treasure to come save me. With that, Yi Zichen ran towards the other side of the mountain range without looking back. Gu Li didn't hesitate at all when he heard Yi Zichen's roar. The bird wasn't something they could deal with. What's more, Enlu and the others were still waiting for the sorrow relief grass to save them. The only thing he could do was run back as fast as possible and tell the venerable of numinous treasure to save them. Guli rushed over. "Don't die. I won't die even if you do," Yizichin transmitted with a snort. When the bird saw Yizichin and Guli split up, its eyes flashed with hesitation, but in the end, it chose to chase after Yizichin, who'd already taken out the sorrow relief grass. As he watched Guli run further and further away, Yizichin's eyes flashed with relief. However, when he thought of the bird behind him, his expression grew solemn. "Why did you come back?" shouted Yang Jian when he saw Yizichin run back. "That bird seems to want the sorrow relief grass," said Yizichin, licking his lips. "Then why don't you just give it to it?" Yang Jian's eyes were filled with impatience. The snow ape's roars grew closer and closer. Before long, they'd be surrounded by two vicious beasts. Screech! At this moment, the bird circling in the sky suddenly swooped down. Yang Jian reflexively slashed out with his lance. Crimson blood dripped from the bird's wings onto the ground, dyeing the snow red. The bird, however, didn't dare touch the wound on its wings. It clawed viciously at Yizichin's shoulders. Under Yizichin's astonished gaze and Yang Jian's terrified gaze, the bird grabbed Yizichin and flew into the sky. Yang Jian's eyes were bloodshot, and his entire body emanated a frightening black aura. He chased after the bird in front of him like a ghost, releasing his divine power as if it was free. The light of the Erlang lance kept slashing at the bird's body. Screech! The bird cried out in pain, but it didn't resist in the slightest. Eventually, they passed through a mountain valley. Yang Jian, in his ghostly form, couldn't even see the bird's shadow. Chapter 1649. Halfway up the mountain, after Yizichin and the others left, the venerable of numinous treasure found a nearby cave to shelter the great sage, Xianji, and the other patients. Their conditions weren't looking good. The great sage's symptoms were the most severe, and he'd already gone into a temporary coma. There was no way he could keep him unconscious for long. If the great sage lost even the slightest bit of consciousness, the Hermit Emperor would do everything in his power to help him regain consciousness. The Venerable of Lingbao stood guard outside the cave. Although he knew the symptoms of these people, he had never practiced medicine. He knew that the only way to save them was to use the sorrow-relieving herb. As for how to slow down their illness, he had no idea. All he could do was maintain a barrier around the cave to warm it up a bit, but at the same time to prevent any vicious beast from attacking. Strangely enough, the snowy mountains they'd encountered so far had suddenly increased in numbers. Based on their expressions, it seemed they'd been chased out. Their expressions were unreconciled, but they also seemed afraid of something. All they could do was flee in panic and search for a new place to rest. If we delay any longer, they won't be able to hold on. The Hermit Emperor looked at the patients and couldn't help but sigh. He'd practiced medicine for so long, he'd learned his fair share of difficult-to-treat illnesses. Even when Xuan Mo's bloodline power had been destroyed, he knew how to cure her. But now, despite being hailed as a medical divine, he was helpless. He'd been left in the cave. Although he didn't know how to slow down their symptoms, he could at least stimulate and wake them up while they were unconscious. Just as the Hermit Emperor was sighing over their plight, a bedraggled but nimble figure appeared at the end of the cave. The figure was fast. In just a few breaths of time, he appeared at the cave's entrance. "You're back." The Venerable of numinous treasure led him back into the cave. The Hermit Emperor glanced behind them, but didn't see anyone else. He couldn't help but be surprised. "This is sorrow relief grass. Save them." The newcomer was none other than Guli. After Yizichin used himself as bait to lure away the flying beasts, he disregarded everything and rushed back. On the way back, he encountered quite a few vicious beasts. It was as if sorrow relief grass was an enticing tonic to the beasts of the snowy mountains. Even the scent of the grass was attacking him. God knows how many beasts he had killed along the way, which is why he looked so haggard. Even though Gu Li's body was covered in countless wounds, the worry-relieving grass in his arms was completely undamaged. He carefully took out the crystalline sorrow relief grass. Although the Venerable of Numinous Treasure was surprised that Yang Jian and Yi Zichen hadn't returned with them, saving people was more important. He didn't say anything else, but turned to the Hermit Emperor. Save them first. How do I use the sorrow-relieving grass? The Hermit Emperor looked at the worry-relief grass in front of him. The Venerable of Numinous Treasure grabbed one and stuffed it into the great sage's mouth. Use it like this. Just feed it. This was actually a very simple method of healing, but it was extremely difficult to use on the great sage and the others. The great sage and Pu Jingwan, whose symptoms were the most severe, had long since lost their sense of self. Even if you placed the sorrow relief grass in their mouths, it would be difficult for them to swallow. After a full 10 minutes or so, the patients finally managed to consume the sorrow relief grass. Right, Yi Zichen and Yang Jian got entangled by two vicious beast leaders so that I could bring the sorrow relief grass back, said Guli hurriedly as he watched the patients consume the sorrow relief grass. I'll go with you, said the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. I'll go with you. You don't know where they are, said Guli. There's no need. You can stay here. The vicious beasts in the mountain range are restless. Even if they wake up, they're still weak. We need someone to stay here to protect them. I can sense the beast's auras, so I can roughly locate them. Besides, in your current state. The Venerable of Numinous Treasure glanced at Guli, who was covered in wounds. He couldn't help but shake his head. It's best if you stay here and recover. Even if you come with me, you'll only be a burden. With that, the Venerable of Numinous Treasure left the cave and disappeared into the snow. Everything was just as the Venerable said. Although the sorrow relief grass was highly toxic, it had a miraculous effect on the 1,000 lotuses. Not long after the sorrow relief grass entered their mouths, Xianji and Enlu woke up. As for the great sage and Pu Jingwan, they could clearly see the dark red lines on their arms recede at a visible rate. Enlu, Guli was just about to take a pill to heal his wounds when he rushed over and hugged Enlu, tears of joy streaming down his face. He was really worried to death. Only when he saw that Enlu had completely woken up did he feel completely at ease. Guli, Enlu smiled. She knew that while she'd been unconscious, Guli had undoubtedly been worried about her. When she saw Guli's wounds, she realized just how much he'd sacrificed to help her recover. Enlu gently brushed away the tears in Guli's eyes, then raised his hand to her eyes. She blew repeatedly into his wound. Does it hurt? Guli shook his head. Even though the wound on his left fist was so deep that his bones were visible, so long as Enlu could wake up, this sort of injury was nothing. When she saw Guli's silent smile, Enlu's heart was filled with pain. After waking up, Xianji sensed her weakness and sat cross-legged on the ground to recover her spiritual power. Enlu tilted her head and looked around, but the person she was looking for wasn't in the cave. Why isn't Big Brother Zichen here? Guli paused, then sat cross-legged to recover his spiritual power. Xianji opened her eyes. Only now did she realize that neither of them were here. When they'd left, she'd been weak, but she'd been conscious. She knew Yi Zichen and the other two had left. She'd woken up because they brought back the antidote. However, only one of the three had returned, and the Venerable of Numinous Treasure wasn't nearby. He's stuck on the way back, but don't worry. He's the Emperor's star. Fortune rivaled the heavens. Nothing unexpected will happen to him. Guli didn't want to lie to Enlu, so he told her the truth. You said Yi stuck? The great sage, who was in the worst condition, suddenly opened his eyes. He instinctively tried to leap to his feet, but in his weakened state, he couldn't even stand straight and fell back to the ground. Even so, he laboriously walked up to Guli and grabbed him by the neck. Tell me the truth. Did Yi get stuck, or did you set him up? Tell me the truth. His fiery eyes flickered with an intimidating light. Even though the great sage was in a very weak state, his eyes were still very intimidating. Just like Yang Jian, he'd never trusted this demon brat who'd committed all sorts of evil. Yi Zichen was kinder by nature. No matter what happened, everyone was willing to look the other way. Out of respect for Yi Zichen, the great sage and Yang Jian didn't bicker with Guli. Now Guli said, Yi Zichen was stuck? I didn't harm him, and there's no need for me to harm him. On our way back, Yang Jian wanted to stop the two beasts for me and Yi Zichen, but one of the birds chased us relentlessly. Yi Zichen was worried about the people here, so he used himself as bait to lure the bird away from me so that I could return to you. We'll deliver the antidote, said Guli. You're lying, the great sage roared. I know you are biased against me, but that is the truth. No matter what you say, I have a clear conscience. I said I didn't harm them. So I didn't, said Guli sternly. Great sage, don't be impatient. The hermit emperor stepped forward. He might be telling the truth. Furthermore, the venerable of numinous treasure has already left to search for Emperor Yi and the others. I presume he'll be back soon. That's right, big brother great sage. Guli wouldn't lie to you, said Enlu, blinking. You better be telling the truth. The great sage glared at Guli. If I, old son, find out that you dared to lie to me, Humph. 6 full hours passed. The patients woke up, and Xianji and the great sage continued to recover their divine power. Pu Jingwan, on the other hand, sat despondently at the cave's entrance, gazing off into the distance like a stone gazing at the snowy mountains. After waking up, she'd learned of Yi Zichen's predicament. Ever since then, she'd been in that state. Based on her conversation with Enlu, she'd always had a bad premonition. A woman's sixth sense was uncannily accurate. She was afraid something might really happen to Yi Zichen, so she suppressed that thought. However, the more she suppressed it, the more severe the rebound became. The beast's movements grew louder and louder, and they appeared more and more frequently. If it weren't for the fact that the Hermit Emperor and the others' auras were so strong that the beasts feared them, they might have long since attacked and occupied the cave. These beasts! The Hermit Emperor couldn't help but mutter to himself. Guli glanced outside, then said, Who knows? The beast's movements might have something to do with us. You? The Hermit Emperor arched his brows. The snow apes guarding the 1,000 lotus flowers are probably the leader of the beasts in this mountain range. When we were retrieving the sorrow relief grass, they attacked us. The 1,000 lotus flowers and sorrow relief grass might have been their nourishment, so we destroyed them. On our way back, the leader of the beasts noticed us. He must have discovered us, and he was furious. These little beasts are probably afraid of the leader's aura. That's why they're acting like this, said Guli. 1,000 lotus flowers? The dazed Pu Jingwan's eyes lit up. How many? Tens of thousands of them. Guli thought back to how many they'd seen. That many? You destroyed them all? Asked Pu Jingwan. Guli nodded gently. Pu Jingwan instantly looked pained, but before long, the lotus no longer had any effect on her. She returned to her dazed, soulless expression as she stared out at the snowstorm outside. Chapter 1650. Yang Jian's condition was terrible. His entire body was covered in blood. The thick stench of blood could be smelled from afar. The venerable of numinous treasure, who was supporting him, was also covered in a layer of blood. Yang Jian's drooping head and arms were still dripping with blood. Every step they took left a trail of blood behind them. His left arm looked as if it had been bitten by a wild beast, its ghastly white bones sticking out. The wound on his chest extended all the way to his abdomen. Blood gushed out continuously. He wasn't holding his lance himself, either. Instead, the venerable of numinous treasure was carrying it on his shoulder. Let him lie down. The Hermit Emperor gestured for everyone in the cave to move aside. The venerable of numinous treasure had just told Yang Jian to lie down on the ground so that the Hermit Emperor could tend to him. Unexpectedly, Yang Jian struggled to sit up, then weakly drew a few silver lines in the air. The silver lines formed a pattern, and a dimensional space suddenly appeared in the void of the cave. That dimensional space also smelled of blood. When everyone looked inside, they saw that Yang Jian had taken out the howling celestial dog, which hadn't been with them all this time. Save it. Yang Jian had learned how to create a dimensional space for battle pets in the outside world. That was why the howling celestial dog was never by his side, but would suddenly appear when he needed it. The once black and domineering howling celestial dog was now lying listlessly on the ground. The blood had made its black fur shine even brighter, but the dog's feeble appearance proved that it wasn't in a very good condition. No one knew what had happened to Yang Jian and the howling celestial dog, but it was obvious that they had been through a terrible battle. "Stop messing around. Hurry up and lie down so I can tend to your wounds," the hermit emperor roared. "Save it." Yang Jian's angry shouts made his wounds bleed even more. His breathing grew weaker and weaker, but his eyes showed that he wasn't going to back down. "Save the howling celestial dog." The great sage glanced at Yang Jian and sighed. In the eyes of others, the howling celestial dog was just a battle pet, but the great sage knew how important it was to Yang Jian. For example, when Yang Jian was at his most difficult, he was always joking in the group about killing the dog to make soup. Even though he was so poor that he didn't even have the money to eat, he still had to prepare the best dog food for Xiao Tianquan. The reason why Yang Jian was so much weaker than the great sage at that time was because Yang Jian couldn't bear to buy healing pills after he was injured. He used his spiritual power to recover, and the money he left over was spent on the howling celestial dog. To it, the celestial hound was more than just a battle pet. They were brothers who had fought alongside him for tens of thousands of years. Unable to persuade Yang Jian, the hermit emperor had no choice but to deal with the howling celestial dog. Fortunately, he had put some effort into veterinary medicine. Otherwise, even if Yang Jian was stubborn, there would be no way to cure the howling celestial dog. Sensing that the howling celestial dog's condition had improved, Yang Jian swallowed the pill that the great sage and the others handed over. "Good boy, your good days are over." The great sage narrowed his eyes and glared at Gu Li, then turned to the venerable of numinous treasure. "Brother Lingbao, how did he become like this? It seems he's recovered quite well." The venerable of numinous treasure smiled at the great sage, then his gaze darkened. "I'm not sure either." The venerable of numinous treasure didn't know. When he hurried over to the leader of the snow apes to save Yi Zichen and Yang Jian, all he saw was Yang Jian struggling to hold on despite being surrounded by countless vicious beasts. As for Yi Zichen's position, he didn't see him at all. The snow ape was obviously a wily old fox. As soon as it sensed the venerable of numinous treasure's aura, it fled the scene without pause. The venerable of numinous treasure didn't even deign to attack the smaller vicious beasts. He simply released his aura, and the beasts fled. By the time the beasts fled, Yang Jian's aura had weakened to the point where it was almost impossible to detect. The venerable of numinous treasure hurriedly brought him back. "Yi isn't with Yang Jian?" asked the great sage. The venerable of numinous treasure shook his head. Before leaving, he'd scanned the area with his divine awareness. Others might be worried about provoking the vicious beasts, but he wasn't afraid. However, this snowy mountain was strange. Even at his cultivation level, his divine awareness couldn't reach more than 10,000 meters. In short, he couldn't find any trace of Yi Zichen within 10,000 meters. He couldn't just watch Yang Jian die just to look for Yi Zichen. All he could do was bring Yang Jian back. As for Yi Zichen, he could ask Yang Jian later. Perhaps he'd get some information. "It was you, wasn't it?" The great sage raised his hand and grabbed Gu Li's collar. "The ferocious beasts were very obedient on the way here, but after you left, they became restless. You just had to come back and leave Ol, Yang, and Yi outside. I've already explained things, so I don't want to explain," said Gu Li coldly. "Big brother great sage." The little cutie and Lu walked out pitifully. As long as he saw her, even the hot-tempered great sage would slightly restrain his anger. He angrily let go of Gu Li's collar and pushed him back. Gu Li simply tidied his clothes and said nothing. "If you have time to argue, why don't you go find Yi Zichen?" Pu Jingwan's eyes reddened. Son, I'm on my way." With that, the great sage turned to leave, but the venerable of numinous treasure pulled him back. "Don't be impulsive. The vicious beasts outside are in a constant state of chaos. Every 100 meters you walk, you'll see several of them. Although your cultivation is extraordinary, you'll have a hard time fending off a wave of vicious beasts. Yang Jian is a living example." "Then what about Yi Zichen?" "You didn't see Yi Zichen, so you'll have to see him dead," said the great sage. "He's not dead," said Gu Li suddenly. "You still have the nerve to talk?" Let me tell you, I'm not done with you. The great sage glared at him. As the great sage and the others bickered, Yang Jian took a few pills and recovered some of his strength. His wounds were still frightening, but he still had the strength to speak. Monkey. Oh, Yang. The great sage walked up to Yang Jian, his eyes filled with concern. He pointed at Gu Li and snorted. Do you think that brat deliberately harmed you? Yang Jian glanced at him. He didn't see a clear denial, but he didn't confirm it either. I don't know, but it really was Yi Zichen who stayed behind to lure the flying beast away so he could deliver the antidote. Is that so? The great sage gazed deeply at Gu Li. Then where the hell is Yi Zichen? Why isn't he with you? I don't know. Yang Jian shook his head, his eyes flashing with self-blame. It's my fault for not protecting him. When Yi Zichen lured the flying beast over, I was just about to attack it, but it completely ignored me. It grabbed Yi Zichen in its claws and flew away. It's impossible to fly in these snowy mountains, so I couldn't catch up at all. All I could do was follow the bird. I attacked it, but when they saw Yang Jian's injuries, the others couldn't bring themselves to blame him. He'd done his best. Oh well, Yang, you did very well. Even the great sage, who'd been bickering with Yang Jian all this time, patted him on the shoulder. However, Yi Zichen's safety was still the most pressing concern in everyone's hearts. Yi Zichen really is alive and well, said Gu Li. We share the Emperor Star, so I can sense it the best. If he really died, then his celestial fate should have landed on me. I don't sense any celestial fate supporting me. That means he's still alive. That's your goal, isn't it? Snorted the great sage. I suggest you act rationally, said Gu Li with a sigh. If I really wanted his celestial fate, there were countless ways I could do it, but I wouldn't do it this way. Besides, I owe him a favor. My previous actions couldn't be considered righteous, but I can't stab someone in the back who's helped me. The great sage sneered, but said nothing. The atmosphere in the cave was strange and unbearable. After a while, Xianji couldn't help but say, There's no need for us to suspect each other. Besides, Heaven chose two emperors. They should be able to sense each other. With that, Xianji looked at Gu Li. Do you know where Yi Zichen is right now? Gu Li shook his head. This snowy mountain range is very strange. I can sense that Yi Zichen is still alive, but I can't sense his location. However, I should be able to find his general direction. Xianji nodded, then turned to the others. All right, let's do it this way. Everyone here, do your best to recover your spiritual energy. Those who are injured, take care of yourselves. Let's wait for the vicious beasts to riot. Once they settle down a bit, we'll go find Yi Zichen. Until then, let's hope the celestial fate can protect Yi Zichen's safety. All right, Yi Zichen didn't know just how long he'd been flying in the sky. In any case, he was in a bit of a daze. However, he'd personally experienced just how cold it was above the snowy mountain range. The frigid wind scraped against his body like knives. He did his best to resist the cold, but by now, his spiritual energy was somewhat depleted. He could sense that the bird wasn't trying to take his life. If it was trying to kill him, it wouldn't even take much effort. It could just toss him down from the sky. Yi Zichen felt that even if he used his spiritual energy to protect himself, he'd still be smashed into a pulp. Furthermore, his spiritual energy was already depleted. He had no idea where the bird was taking him. After grabbing him in its claws, the bird kept flying. It flew past countless mountain peaks. When the vicious beasts sensed the bird's aura, they cautiously hid themselves. It could be seen that this giant bird should be the leader of this mountain range. If there was no accident, it and the other one. If there were no surprises, it and the snow ape were the two vicious kings. Chapter 1651. Some of the larger birds also landed on the ground. They puffed out their chests and stood in 2 rows, gazing at the ferocious bird holding Yi Zichen. Their eyes were filled with reverence and fear. Screech! The ferocious bird circled twice in the sky, then let out a resonant cry. The birds on the ground followed suit and cried out in a language Yi Zichen couldn't understand at all. Afterwards, the ferocious bird descended from the sky, then tossed Yi Zichen to the ground. Thud! Yi Zichen smashed a huge crater into the thick snow. His spiritual energy was already somewhat depleted, so when he was tossed to the ground, his body was practically defenseless. It was a solid fall. Ezechiel stared blankly for a long while before coming to his senses. Screech! As he lay in the snow, Ezechiel could hear the cries of birds all around him. These cries weren't as loud as the ones from before, so he guessed that they belonged to the clansmen of the birds from before. It was as if Ezechiel had become a ginseng on their plate, and the birds were all scrambling to get a bite of him. F***CK. I'm not going to get eaten by these birds, are I? Ezechiel's entire body ached from the fall, so he struggled to his feet. He didn't want to be eaten by these birds for no apparent reason. He stuffed pills into his mouth, but he knew this was most likely the bird's main base of operations. The possibility of him killing his way out of this place was very low, but he couldn't just sit here and wait for these strange birds to eat him. The birds screeched and flew towards him. Ezechiel took a pill and did his best to recover his divine power. At that moment, screech, a resonant cry, sounded out in front of Ezechiel. Ezechiel sensed a shadow looming over him. He looked up and saw the ferocious bird that had brought him here. It stood in front of him and screeched angrily at the smaller birds. The birds really did retreat. Ezechiel seized the moment to recover his divine power. At the same time, he wondered if the giant bird wanted to enjoy him alone. If it was just the smaller birds, Ezechiel might be able to hold them off for a while, but if it was the giant bird, screech! Suddenly, Ezechiel heard a short but powerful cry. When he raised his head, he saw a pair of spirited eyes staring at him. This pair of eyes belonged to the flying beast. Tis! The flying beast shouted again. It seemed to be communicating with Ezechiel. What do you mean? Ezechiel looked at the huge bird in confusion. No matter how knowledgeable he was, it was impossible for him to know the language of beasts. Tis! There was another brief caw. Then the bird looked up, took a few steps forward, then turned back to look at Ezechiel. You want me to follow you? Through its movements, Ezechiel could roughly guess what it was trying to say. The flying beast nodded like a human. From the looks of it, Ezechiel didn't want to eat him, but he still kept an eye on it and carefully recovered his divine power. At the same time, he patted the snow off his body and walked out of the snow. The instant he appeared, it was as if the surrounding birds wanted to devour him. The flying beast screeched once, and the other beasts instantly stopped. However, when they looked at Ezechiel, their eyes flashed with greed. It was as if Ezechiel had some sort of treasure on him that they couldn't ignore. Could it be sorrow relief grass? Ezechiel gently rubbed the sorrow relief grass in his pocket. The venerable of numinous treasure had said it was poison. It existed to refine poisons and cure the 1,000 lotus poison. However, after spending so much time in the snowy mountains, he got the feeling that its uses weren't limited to that. The vicious beasts of the snowy mountains seemed to be very interested in the sorrow relief grass. Screech! The flying beast shouted at Ezechiel, then continued on its own. It was obvious that only this flying beast could control the other birds. It was like an umbrella protecting Ezechiel. Who knew if the birds would try anything after it left? Ezechiel didn't dare think too much about it. He hurried after the flying beast. The flying beast's territory was vast. It seemed the entire snowy mountains were its territory. On the way, Ezechiel saw quite a few ferocious beasts from other clans. When they saw Ezechiel, their eyes flashed with fervent light. However, the giant bird merely shot them a glance, and they all fell to the ground, trembling. You're the gang leader here, aren't you? Ezechiel sensed that the flying beast truly had no ill intentions, so he relaxed and started chatting with it. The flying beast could understand the human language, but it couldn't speak the human language. It tilted its head and glanced at Ezechiel, then screeched, its eyes flashing with bewilderment and confusion. Gang leader means boss, leader, or king. It seems to me that the vicious beasts here are all quite afraid of you. You should be the fiercest here, right? Said Ezechiel. This time, the flying beast completely understood. It nodded proudly, as if confirming Ezechiel's explanation. You really aren't modest at all. Ezechiel chuckled. This beast was clearly different from what he'd imagined. The way he'd seen it, vicious beasts were bloodthirsty, but this one seemed a bit like its tsundere. In particular, when it mentioned its status, it held its head high, like a primary school student who just scored 100 points. However, Yizichin was more concerned about the fact that he'd yet to encounter anyone else who'd entered the snowy mountains. Neither the Ocean Emperor nor the Demon Emperor had sensed it. He didn't see any treasures, either. Aside from the 1,000 lotus flowers, which could be considered a treasure trove, the rest. All he saw were packs of vicious beasts. The only good thing about being captured by the flying beasts was that they were much closer to the palace at the top of the snowy mountains. This snowy mountain could be considered to be made up of countless cones. The Snowy Mountain Palace was located at the peak of the Snowy Mountain Range in the center. There were countless other mountain ranges around this mountain range that were connected to it. The mountain range occupied by the flying beasts belonged to the second ring of the mountain range, the one closest to the palace. It was very close to the palace. There was no way he could outrun the bird. There was no way to fly here, and no matter how fast he ran, he couldn't outrun it. Yizichin just didn't know why the bird was looking for him. It was still bleeding from the wounds Yang Jian had left on its body, but it didn't bother to tend to them. Instead, it just continued on its way. After walking for more than an hour, Yizichin noticed that the path they were taking wasn't quite right. They weren't walking along the main path of the mountain range at all. Instead, they were at the edge of the mountain range, and if they walked a few more steps, they would reach a cliff. "Hey, Brother Eagle." When they were about to reach the edge, Yizichin stopped. The bird looked a bit like an eagle. Yizichin had chatted with it quite a bit on the way, so he might as well just call it that. The eagle glanced back at him. Yizichin said, "There's no more path ahead. There's no path ahead. Are we still going to keep going forward?" Screech. The eagle called out briefly again and nodded in a very human-like manner. "Stop messing around. There's already a path ahead, and I can't fly. Do you want me to fall to my death?" Yizichin was speechless. The eagle blinked as if in thought, then put on a look of disdain, but it still squatted down. "You want me to sit on it?" Yizichin asked. The eagle nodded, then flapped its wings. From the looks of it, it seemed to be saying, "Hurry up, I'm not going to help you if you keep dawdling." Yizichin didn't expect the eagle to be so friendly and let Yizichin sit on its back. To be honest, although Yizichin hadn't had a mount after entering the cultivation circle for so long, sitting on the eagle's back was quite a novelty for him. Yizichin stepped on the eagle's wings and sat on its back, then looked at his empty left arm in confusion. Isn't this Yang Guo and his eagle? This scene could be used to film a new version of the Return of the Condor Heroes. I wonder where Auntie is. The eagle soared into the sky, and when it flapped its wings, a demonic wind blew in all directions. Yizichin clutched the eagle's feathers tightly, then lay on its back and watched as it circled the mountain range. He never would have guessed that the back of the mountain range would be a whole new world. There was a cave in the cliffs. Only a bird like the eagle could find this kind of cave. Below the cave was a cliff shrouded in clouds and mist. Beasts of the land couldn't possibly find this place. The eagle slowed down its flapping of wings. The cave seemed to be its home, and the opening was just big enough for it to enter. Screech. As soon as they entered, the eagle flapped its wings and tossed Yizichin down. Fortunately, there was some dry grass on the ground, so Yizichin had recovered quite a bit of his divine power. He didn't fall too hard. With his back to the eagle, he raised his middle finger, but before Yizichin could complain, he saw that there was a human girl lying in the cave. Yizichin was absolutely certain that this was a human girl. She looked to be in her teens, but Yizichin had no recollection of her at all. Based on the way she was curled up, he could tell that she was very cold. She'd already lost consciousness, so she couldn't use any spiritual energy. Or rather, he couldn't sense any spiritual energy from her at all. However, the sickly red on her face made Yizichin think of Pu Jingwan and the others. She'd been poisoned by 1,000 lotus. The girl's aura was weak. She lay curled up on the grass, trembling uncontrollably and sweating profusely. Yizichin looked into the cave. Although it was a cave with its back facing the wind, the temperature inside the snowy mountains was still very low. For the girl, it was unbearably cold. With a wave of his hand, he placed a seal around the cave, then lit a ball of heavenly fire on his palm. Screech. Chapter 1652. Sensing the eagle's fear, Yi Zichen chuckled and joked with it. Brother Eagle, you're the boss, yet you're already scared of this little fire? Don't worry too much. I'm just trying to keep the girl warm. I'll get rid of the fire soon. When Yi Zichen mentioned the boss, the eagle immediately revealed a proud expression, as if it was saying, "Do you think you can scare me just by lighting the fire?" However, Yi Zichen could still sense the fear of fire in its eyes. It was a fear ingrained in the bones of wild beasts. The temperature of the cave gradually increased, and the curled-up girl felt much more comfortable. Her furrowed brows relaxed slightly, but her face was still flushed with a sickly red. Yi Zichen knew that the condors were afraid of fire, so after stabilizing the temperature of the cave, Yi Zichen extinguished the flames, then walked in front of the girl and flipped her sleeve up. As expected, there was a dark red line on her arm as well. She'd been poisoned by the 1,000 lotus powder. Her sleeves were flipped up, and the line on her arm had long since passed her shoulder. At that moment, the eagle also walked over and looked down at Yi Zichen with a questioning gaze. You came all the way here just to get me to use the sorrow relief grass to save this human girl? Yi Zichen tilted his head and looked at the eagle. In the eyes of ferocious beasts, outsiders like them were all enemies. He didn't expect the eagle to actually save the human girl, and even go to the snow ape to steal the sorrow relief grass. He didn't expect the eagle to be such a good one. The eagle nodded like a human, and occasionally placed its wings on the girl's forehead, as if to feel her temperature. But I know what to do. I do have the sorrow relief grass. Am I supposed to just feed it to her? Yi Zichen looked at the eagle. The eagle nodded vigorously, as if confirming Yi Zichen's words. No way. It's so simple and crude. You don't even need to work on it? Yi Zichen said in disbelief. Don't treat us humans like you Yao beasts. Our digestive and absorption abilities aren't as good as yours. The eagle screeched loudly, as if telling Yi Zichen to do as he said. I already told you, humans aren't as good at absorbing as you Yao beasts. Tell me, how did your big eagle? Just as Yi Zichen finished his sentence, Engwo, who was lying on the hay, suddenly let out a painful groan. Yi Zichen was also worried, while the eagle looked towards the girl worriedly, then continuously flapped its wings and screeched. He had to admit that there was no other way. The Lord of Spiritual Treasure was the one who told him to get the sorrow relief grass. If it weren't for the Lord of Spiritual Treasure, Yi Zichen wouldn't even know about the sorrow relief grass. As the Venerable of Numinous Treasure had never told him how to use it, he naturally did not know. Yi Zichen didn't want to give it to the girl directly for her own good. But in this situation, the girl's condition was already very bad, and he didn't know how to use the worry-relieving herb. Maybe there was no better solution than feeding it to her. The girl's condition was getting worse and worse, and the eagle was crying out anxiously. Then let's try everything we can. The dark red dotted line had already spread past her shoulders. One could only imagine how long she could last. Yi Zichen took out a stalk of sorrow relief grass and placed it in the girl's mouth. However, since she'd already lost consciousness, she wouldn't swallow it on her own. Sorry for the offense. Yi Zichen cupped his hands at the girl, then pressed them against her skin. Divine power surged between his fingers. Yi Zichen used his own divine power to drag the sorrow relief grass into her stomach and let it absorb itself. This seemed simple, but it took Yi Zichen a full hour to finish. Perhaps it was because the girl had a sensitive constitution, but whenever he touched her, she would moan. Yi Zichen's mind was in chaos. Finally, he swallowed the sorrow relief grass. His forehead beaded with sweat. Yi Zichen let out a long sigh and sat to the side. Brother Eagle, is this enough? Asked Yi Zichen. Screech. The eagle nodded happily, then sat down by the girl's side like an obedient baby waiting for its little master to wake up. Yi Zichen was very confused when he saw that. The eagle was obviously a creature of the Transcendence Mausoleum, while the human girl was undoubtedly an expert who'd come from the outside in search of good fortune. The two of them were completely unrelated, but the current situation made Yi Zichen feel like the eagle was actually being raised by the girl. This was way too strange. Also, Everyone here was at least an emperor-level expert. The girl looked to be only 16 or 17. Yet she'd become an emperor? This kind of talent was probably even more monstrous than the Divine Arbiter's nephew. Brother Eagle. Yi Zichen wanted to say a few words to the eagle, but it completely ignored him and remained by the girl's side. Yi Zichen rubbed his nose bitterly and said no more. He walked to the cave's entrance and looked outside. The majestic palace was right in front of him. If he could fly, he'd reach it in less than 100 breaths of time. However, he couldn't fly here. If he walked, who knew how long he'd have to walk? He was more concerned about the great sage and the others. He didn't know if Guli had safely returned the sorrow relief grass, but he was also worried about whether they were worried about his safety. Screech! All of a sudden, the huge eagle in the cave let out an excited cry. When Yi Zichen heard that, he turned around and saw that the girl on the hay was already showing signs of waking up. He walked up to her, only to see her slowly open her eyes. Screech! Screech! The eagle happily circled around her. Yi Zichen could sense how weak she was, so he took out a divine-grade spirit recovery pill and placed it in her hands. You're a human? The girl didn't accept the pill right away. Yi Zichen nodded non-committally. The girl clearly hadn't expected to see a human here either. A hint of surprise flashed through her eyes. Then, she looked at the huge condor and said, "You were the one who captured her, weren't you?" The eagle pretended not to understand human language and looked curiously at the girl. The girl smiled helplessly, patted the eagle's wings, then smiled apologetically at Yi Zichen. "I'm sorry. I've delayed your time fighting for good fortune and treasures. It's no problem. You're very weak right now, so this pill should be useful to you." Yi Zichen handed the pill to her. The girl leaned in and sniffed it. A divine-grade spirit recovery pill. It seems you're no ordinary person in the outside world. Anyone who can make it here can't possibly be an ordinary person, laughed Yi Zichen. The girl didn't retort. Anyone who could make it here was at least an emperor-level expert. In the outside world, they were all overlord-level existences. They naturally weren't ordinary people. However, the ordinary people she was referring to weren't actually these people. But since Yi Zichen didn't want to talk about it, she wouldn't force the topic. Let's chat. Thanks. The girl didn't act coy. She accepted the pill. A divine-grade spirit recovery pill was indeed the best tonic for someone like her, who'd run out of spiritual energy. As soon as the pill entered her mouth, she sat down cross-legged to recover her divine power. The divine-grade spirit recovery pill contained quite a bit of divine power, but it definitely wasn't enough to help an emperor-level expert recover completely. After recovering roughly 30%, the girl emerged from her meditative state. Screech! Suddenly, a serious look flashed through the eagle's eyes, and it called out to the young girl. The girl narrowed her eyes as if she could understand the eagle's words. Do you need help? The eagle shook its head. Then be careful. As soon as he finished speaking, the eagle flew out of the cave. As he watched it leave, Yi Zichen's eyes widened. He couldn't help but curse inwardly. Brother Eagle, when you leave, take me out too. Big White said outsiders invaded his territory. He has to go out and deal with it. When he returns, I'll have him take you out, said the girl, as if she'd read Yi Zichen's thoughts. Outsiders? That's... To them, the ones who are outsiders are naturally us. The girl smiled. Then I don't know if I should say something. Yi Zichen's eyes flashed with hesitation. You're sort of my savior. If you have anything to say, just ask. As long as it's something I can say, I won't hold anything back, laughed the girl. You've known the eagle for a long time. Are you talking about Big White? The girl smiled. Of course I don't know him. I came in from the outside as well. When I entered the snowy mountains, I was directly transported to Big White's territory. I was nearly eaten by those birds, but Big White saved me. He has a good impression of humans. I don't know, but he's pretty good to me. Pretty much all the treasures around his territory were snatched by him for me. Yi Zichen was speechless. Outsiders like us have to fight ferocious beasts just to get some treasures. This girl's luck is good. She took a liking to the Overlord the moment she came in, and the Overlord helped her snatch treasures. Isn't that infuriating? Maybe it's because I look a bit similar to Big White's mistress when he was alive, so he has a good impression of me. But don't ask me about Big White's past. I didn't ask him in depth, so I don't know that. This girl really does seem to know how to read minds. Yizichin didn't want to ask about Big White's past, but before he could, the girl cut him off. Yizichin raised his eyebrows at being unable to understand Big White's past. You know the language of beasts? A bit. Do you know what it means to chat awkwardly? That's what Yizichin and the girl in front of him felt. They didn't know each other before, so their communication was limited to one asking and the other answering. Oh yeah, I still don't know your name. You saved my life. I will definitely return the favor after I get out, said the girl. Yizichin hesitated for a moment. He didn't really want to use his real name, but this was a favor from at least an emperor-level expert. Yizichin couldn't bear to reject it. Yizichin decided to say his real name after thinking about it for a moment. To his surprise, the girl's eyes lit up when she heard his name. Is your mother Yiron?